Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. Protests erupt in multiple cities across the country. What Texas is doing to stay ahead of the game. And a federal judge refused to immediately grant a request by California Governor Gavin Newsom as state and federal officials butt heads. The U.S. and China make a deal after 2 days of trade talks in London. More on the terms of the agreement and the comment from President Trump. Tech billionaire Elon Musk said he regrets recent posts about President Trump, saying they went too far. Where is their professional relationship going? President Trump's business records case is back in court. A federal appeals court hears arguments as Trump attempts to overturn his criminal conviction.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, June 11th. I'm Kevin Hogan. As the protests in Los Angeles enter their sixth day, a federal judge has rejected Governor Gavin Newsom's request to immediately block federal troops from the city. This comes as protesters defy a curfew following looting and violence. Here's the latest.
A federal judge did not immediately rule on the California governor's request to block the Trump administration from deploying federal troops in Los Angeles. Governor Gavin Newsom's request argues Trump's mobilization of the National Guard is unlawful, as the section it invoked can only be used in cases of rebellion or situations where regular forces are unable to enforce the law. Newsom argued what's happening in LA doesn't qualify as a rebellion, that the federal government bypassed the governor. He also argued it might be in violation of a law barring active duty military personnel and federalized National Guard from civilian law enforcement known as the Posse Comitatus Act. However, U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer has given the Trump administration more time to respond until 11 a.m. Wednesday. He also granted Newsom an additional day to respond to the administration's response. Meanwhile, LA Mayor Karen Bass has announced a curfew in the city's downtown areas. Bass said Tuesday 23 businesses across downtown LA had been locked Monday night.
So my message to you is, if you do not live or work in downtown LA, avoid the area. Law enforcement will arrest individuals who break the curfew, and you will be prosecuted.
The curfew went into effect at 8 p.m. Tuesday and lasted until 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. Bass said she expected the curfew to last for several days. However, protests continued through the night, with groups violating the order. The LAPD said on social media it was carrying out mass arrests. But Bass also said what's happening downtown is not affecting the rest of the city.
I think it is important to point this out, not to minimize the vandalism and violence that has taken place there. It has been significant, but it is extremely important to know that what is happening in this 1 square mile is not affecting the city.
Meanwhile, LA's Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hatami said Tuesday on Newsmax the situation demands cooperation between local and federal agents. His comments came after clashes between protesters and law enforcement over the weekend.
So here's the thing. If we can't protect law enforcement, even federal law enforcement, and if we can't detain individuals who are here illegally, who have committed violent crimes, well, then you're going to need other departments and organizations to help.
He argued LA's sanctuary city status makes it impossible for the kind of cooperation required. He also delivered a message to protesters saying anyone caught engaging in violence and criminal activity will be hit with the full force of the law.
Here's the thing. Looting is a crime, and you're going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for that. Committing arson is a crime. Assaulting the police is a crime. Launching fireworks at them, launching fireworks at horses, throwing Molotov cocktails at them, lighting cars on fire, ramming your motorcycle or car into police officers, throwing rocks at police cars, regular cars, or police officers. All those are crimes.
President Trump, meanwhile, has also weighed in, vowing to keep the military inside LA until there's peace on the streets.
If there's peace, we get out. If there's even a chance of no peace, we stay there until there's peace.
As all of this unfolds, the FBI says it's investigating who might be funding the protests. FBI Director Kash Patel told Just the News, quote, "The FBI is investigating any and all monetary connections responsible for these riots."
Videos circulating online show multiple stores in downtown LA being looted Monday night, with windows smashed at the Apple and Adidas stores and merchandise stolen. Governor Gavin Newsom said state and local law enforcement were mostly successful in maintaining order despite a few incidents. He added that California is no stranger to episodes of civil unrest. Meanwhile, Vivek Ramaswamy and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis criticized California as being unsafe and mismanaged. And Los Angeles isn't the only city seeing unrest. Protests have erupted in other cities, including Philadelphia, San Francisco, Seattle, and Chicago. Footage showed demonstrators gathering in Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and New York, calling for unity in support of immigrants. In Austin, Texas, protesters gathered outside a federal building. Police say some individuals threw rocks, tossed scooters, and barricades into roads. Multiple arrests were made and 4 officers were injured. In Chicago, crowds flooded the streets and several confrontations were reported between demonstrators and police. Activists say more and larger demonstrations are planned nationwide this weekend. Counter-protests also occurred. In Los Angeles, one man wearing a red "Make America Great Again" hat exchanged heated words with protesters. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott says the Texas National Guard will be deployed across the state to ensure law and order. Abbott says peaceful protest is legal, but harming people or property is not and will lead to arrest. The governor says National Guardsmen will use every tool and strategy to help law enforcement maintain order. President Trump doubles down on the need for federal intervention as he deploys active duty Marines and more National Guard troops to Los Angeles. He's also warning of heavy force if protests spread to this weekend's military parade in Washington, D.C. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has the details.
Speaking to thousands of service members and veterans at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, President Trump again doubles down on his move to send hundreds of active duty Marines as well as now a total of around 4,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles. He says the city will be burned down if he hadn't do so, adding that Democratic leaders in the state aren't doing enough to contain the situation.
We didn't do it, there wouldn't be a Los Angeles. Generations of Army heroes did not shed their blood on distant shores only to watch our country be destroyed by invasion and third world lawlessness. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not let that happen.
While President Trump has sent troops, he has not invoked the Insurrection Act. And without that, active duty troops cannot perform law enforcement activities on U.S. soil. They're mainly there protecting federal agents and buildings, which the administration says are facing increased threats. And Trump, though, said he would certainly invoke the Insurrection Act if there is one, adding,
there are certain areas of Los Angeles that you could have called it an insurrection.
He also alleges that some violent protesters are professionally trained and being financed, citing their actions like breaking curbs with hammers and what he calls professional equipment.
Attempting to infiltrate and occupy federal buildings wearing armor and face shields. The best money can buy, somebody's financing it. We're going to find out who's financing all this equipment. Very professional.
And President Trump said it also compared the situation in Los Angeles to what he calls an invasion by foreign enemy, blaming President Biden's border policies for an influx of what Trump refers to as gang members as well as drug lords. He vows to liberate Los Angeles and make it free and clean again.
The only flag that will wave triumphant over the streets of Los Angeles is the American flag. So help me God.
And speaking earlier from the Oval Office here at the White House, President Trump warned that if there are protests spreading to this weekend's military parade here in Washington, D.C., protesters will be met with heavy force. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
The U.S. and China have struck a trade deal at talks in London. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick spoke to the media early this morning after 2 days of intense negotiations. He said the new deal fleshed out a provisional agreement reached last month in Geneva. Here's Secretary Lutnick.
So the idea is we're going to go back and speak to President Trump and make sure he approves it. They're going to go back and speak to President Xi and make sure he approves it. And if that is approved, we will then implement the framework that we have worked hard over these last 2 days.
Lutnick said the new agreement put meat on the bones of the Geneva deal that had faltered over China's curbs on the export of critical rare earth minerals. Now Lutnick says those restrictions will be removed as a fundamental part of the new framework. He said that some recent US export restrictions would also be lifted. Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Li Chenggang also spoke to reporters. He confirmed that agreement had been reached and said both sides would now report back to national leaders. Markets gave the news a cautious welcome, with Asian stocks posting modest gains in Wednesday trade.
President Trump said today the U.S. deal with China is done. He said on Truth Social that Beijing will supply magnets and rare earth minerals to the U.S. In return, the U.S. will allow Chinese students to attend American colleges and universities. He added, quote, "We are getting a total of 55% tariffs. China is getting 10%. Trump said the deal is subject to final approval by him and China's Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. And Elon Musk stepped back from his recent feud with President Trump. He said on X that he regrets some of the posts about Trump and that they went too far. Musk wrote on his social media platform X, quote, "I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week. They went too far." He did not say which specific posts he was talking about, though he has deleted several that were critical of Trump. One of those signaled support for impeaching the president. Musk's relationship with Trump deteriorated in public fashion last week as the two men traded jibes on social media. Musk slammed Trump's tax and domestic policy bill, labeling it a disgusting abomination. Trump said on Saturday their relationship was over, but he has since stated he wouldn't have a problem if Musk called and wished him well. A victory for the Trump administration's tariffs plan, at least for now. A federal appeals court ruled yesterday the government can keep many of its tariffs on China and other countries while legal challenges play out. The appeals court said the case raised issues of exceptional importance. The court is therefore taking the rare step of having the 11-member court hear the appeal instead of it going before a 3-judge panel first. It scheduled arguments for late July. The Court of International Trade ruled last month the president exceeded his authority to impose tariffs after he claimed a national emergency. The Trump administration appealed, leading to yesterday's ruling. And Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent is testifying before the House Ways and Means Committee. The hearing is set to focus on the Treasury Department's priorities. Let's tune into that.
7.4 million new jobs will be created or saved, including 1 million small business jobs annually. And they need it after 4 years of Washington Democrats doing the opposite. This bill breaks with Democrats on surrendering American tax revenue to foreign governments. Instead, we put America first. We give President Trump the tools needed to stand up to foreign nations that unfairly tax American businesses. We will defend our tax sovereignty. If these countries choose to withdraw their unfair taxes, this policy will have achieved its goal. I'm looking forward to my Senate colleagues quickly passing the one big, beautiful bill so that we can get it to the president's desk by July 4th. This committee will work closely with the Treasury Department to ensure implementation of this law gives workers, families, farmers, and small businesses the tax relief they are owed and as soon as possible. I also want to acknowledge another component of President Trump's economic agenda that is central to this committee's responsibility: the president's trade and tariff actions. Even the Biden administration acknowledged the success of the first-term Trump tariffs by keeping them in place. Democrats had no issues with that. But now that President Trump is back in office and once again aggressively leveraging tariffs to create fair treatment for American manufacturers, farmers, and workers, Democrats dislike tariffs again. I'm encouraged by the progress we have made to tear down unfair trade barriers and the ongoing consultation Secretary Bessent and others in the administration have had with us to ensure better trade agreements that open market access for American products and services and hold foreign trading partners accountable. Thank you, Secretary, for your hard work in advancing the president's agenda. I look forward to continuing to work with you and appreciate you taking time to answer our questions today. I am pleased to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Neal, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. Forgive me if I point out that we've all heard this argument before. Tax cuts and growth. 201, 203, $2.3 trillion of tax cuts. 2017, let's borrow $2.3 trillion in tax cuts. as we project economic growth. But somehow tax cuts pay for themselves because that's the theology that became so popular. When there's a Democrat sitting in the White House, it's always about the national debt. When there's a Republican sitting in the White House, it's always about tax cuts. During our conversation that went pretty well, Mr. Secretary, I did remind you that you are a successor to Alexander Hamilton. I have known the men and women who have had the title that you have today. It'll be the title at the end of your life you perhaps, other than a family person, will cherish the most. The people that have had this job, they don't fudge the numbers. The people that have had this job, they don't bend to political considerations. They give advice based upon reality and the success you've had in your career. Since Republicans reclaimed power, they've had a trifecta. What have we seen? It's the constant chaos. Whether it's been the DOGE shadow operating as they rifle through confidential data, the blatant weaponization of the IRS, as they've attempted to change tax collection policy in this country, they have misled us, they have circumvented oversights, they have misled the public, and they have bent the levers of power to benefit those in the Oval Office. This committee is rubber stamping all of it. That is not our job. The members on this committee know I questioned Democratic presidents when I disagreed with them publicly and stayed with my disagreement if I thought it was based on principle. We see none of that any longer. It's what is stated at the White House that everybody acquiesces to on the Republican side. A blank check for the president. Never mind that we'll let wealthy tax cheats go. Never mind that the theology of tax cuts paying for themselves doesn't stand up. Never mind the pathology that if we only have tax cuts, it'll always work out. Well, they're attempting now to ram through what a very prominent former best friend of the president had to say. He called the tax bill an abomination. The Trump congressional Republicans certainly are about to make history. They're going to be responsible for adding $4 trillion to the national debt and simultaneously cutting health care for 16 million Americans. The changes that have taken place, the chaos of the tariff bill, we don't object to tariffs. When implied and suggested for an outcome, we object to the chaotic nature of how those tariffs are being applied. We've driven away friends across the globe. We've driven away careful allies. I negotiated USMCA. It was done the right way, and the president at the time said it was the best trade bill in the history of the world. Today, it's the worst trade bill in the history of the world. That's what we object to on the Democratic side. You've had a reputation, Mr. Secretary, for sound, fact-based decision-making. I hope it continues to set you apart from other members of the administration. But we shouldn't be attacking the scorekeepers. I have many days when I've disagreed with the Joint Committee on Taxation. I've had many days when I've disagreed with the Congressional Budget Office. I've had many days when I've disagreed with the World Bank. But I don't suggest it's partisan. I don't suggest that they're making up the numbers. I suggest instead it's an honest disagreement. And I don't come back to the argument that they don't know what they're talking about. The math here is true. It's projected correctly. $4 trillion at least to the national debt. That takes us from 36 to 41 trillion dollars of debt. When the new administration took office, they said clearly that the reality of their economic policies would be there for all to see. Well, you know what? They were accurate in that statement. The American people are being left behind in a system that is rigged, and I don't use that very often. The rich right now in America do not need a tax cut. Downward pressure on wages created by a lot of different issues should be reasoned and considered here in this committee. We could find an agreement with the Republican Party on an awful lot of things if we left the position clear, as we did in the previous administration, where those under $400,000 would have tax relief, not those over $400,000. Oversight is a sacred obligation of this Congress. Republicans need to at least, from time to time, ask a few real questions of the administration before the white flag of surrender goes up to these arguments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Today's sole witness is United States Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent. The committee has received your written testimony, and it will be made part of the formal hearing record. Secretary Bessent, you have 5 minutes to deliver your remarks, and you may begin when you are ready.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal, and members of the committee, I'm grateful to join you today. Treasury is committed to working with Congress to improve our nation's finances, create new jobs, and strengthen the economy. We look forward to coordinating with you on the President's budget, his tax priorities in the coming weeks. As part of this effort, I wish to highlight today the Treasury Department's efforts to advance President Trump's economic agenda on tax and trade. First, tax. I'm pleased to report that Treasury has just completed its most successful tax filing season in years, and we did so while improving efficiencies and cutting costs at the IRS. Critics of the President's efforts to modernize the IRS warned that the effort would result in a 10% shortfall in receipts. Instead, the opposite happened. April receipts this year were up 9.5% over the previous year, and receipts in May were up 14.7% over the previous year. Most remarkably, the President was able to achieve these results while reducing $2 billion in waste and planned IT spending at the IRS. This success has taken place against the backdrop of one of the most consequential tax proposals ever to come before Congress, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or as I will call it today, OBBB. The One Big Beautiful Bill will make the 2017 tax cuts permanent. This will provide individuals and businesses with certainty and build economic momentum. The legislation is squarely aimed at boosting the working and middle class and reinvigorating American manufacturing. According to the Council of Economic Advisors, the One Big Beautiful Bill will raise take-home pay between $7,800 and $13,300 for the average family of four. It will increase wages between $6,100 to $11,600 for the average worker, and it will cement no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and tax cuts for seniors. The One Big Beautiful Bill will also incentivize unprecedented investment in U.S. manufacturing. The legislation will provide 100% expensing for new factories, as well as existing factories that expand operations and support Made in America. It will streamline burdensome permitting processes that often stand in the way of new manufacturing projects. It's time for this country to start building things again, and the OBBB makes this possible. The administration is grateful for the leadership of this committee in shepherding the One Big Beautiful Bill through the House. We are working closely with members of the Senate to get this legislation to the President's desk. Trade is the second topic I wish to highlight. The progress we have made on tax issues over the last 4 months complements the significant progress we have made in rebalancing the global economy. Since I last testified before Congress in May, the President announced a historic U.S.-UK trade deal. This arrangement, which creates a $5 billion export opportunity for American ranchers, farmers, and manufacturers, is a preview of what's to come. Dozens of countries have engaged the administration thus far with offers to improve their trade relations with the United States. This includes China. I have just returned in the middle of last night from successful negotiations in London with a Chinese delegation that will not only stabilize the economic relationship between our two economies, but make it more balanced. China has a singular opportunity to stabilize its economy by shifting away from excess production towards greater consumption. But the country needs to be a reliable partner in trade negotiations. If China will course correct by upholding its end of the initial trade agreement we outlined in Geneva, and I believe after our talks in London they will, then the rebalancing of the world's two largest economies is possible. By challenging the decades-old status quo on tax and trade, President Trump is breathing new life into the American economy. More than 500,000 private sector payroll jobs have been added since January. Most importantly, inflation in the U.S. is at its slowest pace since 2021, and the numbers we received today take us back to the slowest pace since 2020. Most importantly, we are decelerating cost increases for shelter, food, and energy. After 4 years of price increases diminishing the U.S. standard of living, inflation is showing substantial improvement due to the administration's policies. Furthermore, the labor market remains strong with low unemployment and plentiful labor demand as job openings remain high. This strength has been exemplified in the recent performance of the stock market and consumer confidence data. The president's bold leadership on these issues has laid the ground for a golden age economy. With your help, we can build on that foundation to create even more prosperity and abundance for the American people. We hope you will join us in this endeavor. Thank you all, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to the question and answer session. One of the more absurd attacks we hear from our Democrat colleagues is that the one big, beautiful bill is focused on the wealthy, not the working class. I'm sure the waitress who will keep more of her hard-earned money under the no tax on tips policy, or the lineman burning the midnight oil to restore power and seeing a tax cut under the no tax on overtime policy would be surprised to learn that Democrats consider them wealthy. Secretary Bessent, whether it is those policies or the tax relief in the bill for seniors, the double child tax credit and standard deduction, or the fact that the tax burden on the truly wealthy will actually rise under this bill, how does the one big, beautiful bill deliver primarily for working families?
Thank you for that question, Chairman Smith. As we saw in President Trump's first term, substantial non-inflationary growth was created. Non-inflationary growth. Real wages rose, and working Americans did better. Hourly workers did better than supervisory workers. We believe that this will happen again. As you outlined, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, the tax breaks for seniors on Social Security, and the ability to deduct auto loans on new cars made in America, as was available when I bought my first car in 1978, will be restored. All of this will help working Americans overcome this horrendous affordability crisis that this administration inherited.
The Biden administration negotiated a global tax scheme through the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development that would rob American taxpayers of $120 billion and would discriminate against American businesses. President Trump issued a day one executive order opposing the Biden administration's global tax surrender. In the one big beautiful bill, Congress provides the president, in line with that directive, specific targeted authorities to fight back in the event nations impose a discriminatory tax on American businesses, such as a UTPR. Last week, members of this committee met with an ambassador who was specifically concerned about how this provision would give the U.S. the ability to stand up for American businesses and respond to an unfair tax his country has imposed on American job creators. Secretary Bessent, why is it important for the Treasury Department and the President to have strong protective measures, like the one provided in the One Big Beautiful Bill to fight against foreign taxes that discriminate against American companies? And how will the administration ensure that the use is targeted and in a manner to protect or replace U.S. tax revenue?
Mr. Chairman, for whatever reason, the previous administration chose to outsource American sovereignty on tax matters, and the Trump administration believes that is unacceptable. Unacceptable. Many other countries would seek to pull in revenues from U.S. multinational corporations into their treasuries. And rest assured that the provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill to combat this are a staking out of our fiscal sovereignty. The U.S. tax system will stand next to what is called Pillar 2, and other countries are welcome to relinquish their fiscal and tax sovereignty to other nations. The United States will not. So this bill will allow us to prevent our corporate revenues from being drained into foreign treasuries, and that is in the hundreds of billions of dollars.
Thank you, Secretary. President Trump is also using tariffs to level the playing field and demand fair treatment for American workers, farmers, and manufacturers. Secretary, you are on the front lines of the president's economic policy agenda, including through your lead role in trade negotiations to demand fair treatment from China over the last couple days. How do the president's trade policies and tariffs and the total reset of our unfair trade and investment relationship with China that President Trump has led fit into the broader effort to reorient America's economy toward one that serves the working class instead of just the wealthy elites?
Mr. Chairman, China currently has the most imbalanced economy in the history of the world. They now have an approximate 30% share of global manufacturing, and they continually grow their manufacturing base. They are in the midst of a real estate downturn, some may cause a crisis, and they are trying to export their way out of it rather than take domestic measures such as increasing consumption, dealing with banking problems, or dealing with the real estate crisis. They cannot be allowed to export their way back to prosperity, which would mean substantial decreases in the standards of living, not only for the United States working Americans, but for working citizens across the world. Our negotiations with all countries seek to bring fairness. And I will echo President Trump's remarks. There are 18 important trading partners that we are in fulsome negotiations with. Many of them are coming to us with unimaginably good trade deals to bring down tariffs, non-tariff trade barriers, which the academic research has shown to can be even more pernicious than the tariffs, currency manipulation, and the subsidy of labor and industry. But as these countries come to us, and I look at the list, and I think, how could this have happened? How could this have happened? That the United States willingly became party to such unfair, and unbalanced trade. And as President Trump has said, I don't blame the other countries. If you could get away with it, you should. It was those sitting behind the Resolute desk or those making trade policy who've allowed this to happen over 40 years. And we are determined to rebalance that for the American people.
Thank you, Secretary. I now recognize the ranking member for any questions he might have.
Thank you, Chairman. So maybe we could stick to a couple of facts here, as previously discussed, and that is that if you made $1 million last year, You're going to get about $84,000 in tax relief with this bill. If you made under $50,000, you are likely to get about $1 a day. The president said that we'd have 90 trade agreements in 90 days. We're 89 short because of the manner in which some of these allies have been offended. We want trade balance for sure, but we also want to make sure that it's done in a manner that will last, not subject to the whims of the administration. I understand, Mr. Secretary, that you don't agree with some of the economic forecasts that have been projected as it relates to the big, beautiful bill. So Penn Wharton says this bill will add trillions of dollars to the national debt. The Yale Budget Lab says this will add trillions of dollars to the national debt. Well, we're 0 for 2. But how about Maya McGinnis, not exactly known for their socialist leanings? They say this will add trillions of dollars to the national debt. Well, let's go to the Tax Foundation, hardly a left-leaning political organization. They say this will add trillions of dollars to the national debt because the money's going to be borrowed. Here, facts should matter. The advice of experts should matter. We have seen the bond market's reaction to some of these proposals. They're jittery. But you know what? In this committee, we listen. The administration is putting its head in the sand on this debt issue. The facts are going to be hard to escape. So let me turn to the impact of budget reconciliation as it relates to health care. In addition to adding trillions to the U.S. debt, the bill will cause 16 million Americans to lose part or all of their health insurance, according to CBO. We know what the consequence will be of losing health insurance for the American family. More visits to the emergency room, more postponed treatments, more bankruptcies that will come because of it. The problems that people have with health insurance only mean that later on the problems pile up. Bad health, the challenge that is now going to occur for our rural hospitals, surely many of which will be forced to close. Cutting more than $1.5 trillion from Medicaid, Medicare, and the Affordable Care Act certainly will mean job losses. No industry can sustain $1.5 trillion in cuts while we borrow money for a big tax cut that, despite what has been said here today, still favors people overwhelmingly at the top. Let me say, in regard to the testimony, Mr. Secretary, that you've offered, there's another key consideration here. You're suggesting that the improvements at the IRS have all taken place in the last 6 months? It's because of what we did with the Inflation Reduction Act. That's why the improvements have taken place, the technological upgrades that have taken place as well. We have a pretty good understanding of this. We want to use artificial intelligence for better tax collections. But all of this just happened in the last 6 months. That's our understanding based upon the testimony. The Commonwealth Fund, cuts to Medicaid and SNAP are going to lead to the loss of over 1 million jobs. The American Hospital Association estimates that tens of thousands of hospital jobs will be lost as a result of these cuts. Furthermore, a professor at Yale has said that this will conservatively cause tens of thousands of unnecessary deaths. Worse health care, job losses, more borrowed money. The American people deserve considerably better than what we're being told. But let me offer this challenge, Mr. Secretary. We would be prepared on the minority side to work with the administration and direct tax relief back to people under $400,000 of joint income, as opposed to the suggestion that is being offered here today. And if you disagree with the number that I offered about tax relief for somebody who made $1 million last year, let me give you the last 30 seconds to speak to that.
Representative Neal, I have great respect for you. We've had good conversations, but respectfully, if I weigh 1,000 pounds and you weigh 50, and I gain 10 pounds, or I gain 10%, I have gained 100,000. That during President Trump's first tax cuts, the share of taxes paid by the high end of taxpayers, they increased by more than 7%. And I'm sorry, I chuckled when you talked about the IT at the IRS. The program is 35 years behind schedule. 35 years. And is wasting $2 billion a year.
That's why we put the extra money in, Mr.
No. The extra money went in for bodies, and whistleblowers acknowledged that standards were being lowered to bring in new agents. The money is not the issue here. It is how the money is spent.
That's exactly right. We agree on that, how the money is spent. And the last point that I would make...
It has been spent poorly.
Let me make this last point, Mr. Secretary. Do you agree with the idea that in 2017, that the federal government, emanating from this committee, borrowed $2.3 trillion for that tax cut?
What I believe is that everyone on the Democratic side voted for the biggest blowout for the deficit in history, and that we are suffering from that. This past tax year, we will have between a 6.5 and 6.7% deficit, so I find it very difficult to be lectured to by people who created the largest deficit in history when we were not at war and not in a recession.
So I negotiated with Secretary Mnuchin the pandemic relief bill. If that's the reference point. That's where overwhelmingly the money went. That was not a bad infusion of money. It worked. The Economist magazine and the Financial Times said in January the American economy was the envy of the world. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
Well, the spending was not the envy of the world.
I'm pleased to recognize the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Buchanan.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here today. There's no doubt that your knowledge of finance and global markets bring a unique and welcome perspective to the Treasury, and this country is fortunate to have your leadership. Since coming to Congress, I've seen administrations from both parties, I'll say that up front, in terms of what's happened with the debt deficit. I want to get your perspective. I mean, the reality is, last 20 years, over $20 trillion in additional debt. I remember in the 80s, frankly, where we had the junk bond markets. If I look at all these younger people out here, what we're leaving them is deplorable. And I just want to make sure that we're giving as much consideration as we can to that. 49 out of 50 governors have to balance the budget. It's my biggest issue up here. It's not about one party or the other. It's both parties have done little or nothing in this area, and it needs to get addressed. When you spend last year, you take in $5 trillion, spend $7 trillion, and you average over $1 trillion a year for over the last 20 years. We need to get real about it, because again, in the 70s, in the 80s, all the junk bond, I seen what happened with all the markets and all that. So can you I know you touched on it, but could you, and we'll get into the pro-growth things in a minute, can you just touch on it, your thoughts about where we're at and where we're going as it relates to that? I know we've got people looking at making cuts, but I do want to get your perspective on that.
Congressman, I've enjoyed our conversations in the past. You, as a very successful private businessman, understand the power of this tax bill, especially in the expensing. You and I discussed it in great detail. And look, we do not have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. We are right in line with the long-term revenues of approximately 17 to 18% of GDP. What we've seen here is a blowout in the spending. And as I was saying, last fiscal year was something we have never seen before. We have never seen a deficit to GDP this large when we were not at war, or not in a recession, or not in a pandemic.
Yeah,
But
Mr.
we could
Secretary,
call that a war.
I only have 5 minutes. Let me just
oh.
mention just real quickly. You mentioned, and I just want to get this in, that 100% expensing is like jet fuel. And 199 is huge. These are huge opportunities to make a big difference for small business. But to me, it's because I'm so passionate about it, because they're the job creators. So can you comment on that, your thoughts in terms of 199A and 100% expensing?
Congressman, I'll very quickly comment on two things. It is the 100% expensing that is powerful, and we are adding not only expensing for equipment, as in President Trump's first term, we are adding 100% for factory structures. So if you want to build your factory here in the U.S., we want it to be tax efficient. We want you to have regulatory certainty. We want you to have quick permitting, and that is likely the single most powerful aspect. As the ranking member discussed, on the 400,000 level, that unfortunately is a disaster for small business in the 199. Most small businesses are pass-through entities, and those small businesses are substantially above that 400,000 threshold.
Yeah, let me just add just a closing point. I do want to make on the whole thing of full expensing. It's probably the most powerful tool, whether you're buying or selling. Someone that's been in business for 40 years or so, I can tell you firsthand, it's a powerful tool. It's a job-creating tool. I did want to have you comment the other thing on making, I'd say in Florida, I was chairman of the Florida Chamber, one of the big issues there is about making the tax, whatever we do on taxes, making it permanent so they got more certainty, they can do planning and investing in terms of going forward. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, sir. I was with a group of business leaders earlier this week, and they were telling me that they are, in fact, holding back on CapEx because they need for the tax bill to pass so that they will have certainty that the 100% expensing will come back. I think that we will see a sharp upward break in terms of CapEx as soon as we pass the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Thank you, and thanks for your leadership. We're excited you're here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doggett.
Thank you. If beauty is in the eye of the beholder, certainly I can understand, Mr. Secretary, why you and the members of the Trump cabinet are so enthusiastic about this beautiful bill. It gives so much to those at the top, and of course, Trump appointees are not just in the top 1%, but the top 1,000th of 1%. I applaud your personal success, but isn't it true that for you and for a number of cabinet members and other Trump appointees, simply not having your taxes restored to the level that existed when President Bush and President Obama were in office at 39.6% will provide you very substantial personal benefit? Yes or no?
That is not a yes or no question, sir.
All right, if you can't answer it.
As many people
thank you, reclaiming my time. If you can't answer,
have different tax
reclaiming my time, please, sir.
And it is shown,
Mr. Chairman, I don't want my time taken if the witness will not yield.
I would recommend, Mr. Doggett, that if you asked a question, at least allow them to answer.
You can recommend it, but you're taking my time from him answering the questions.
So
continue. Let me say, I understand you can't answer that with a yes or no. I'm concerned about the weaponization of the Internal Revenue Tax Code by the President and your role in it. Section 7217 of the Internal Revenue Code makes it unlawful for the President and his partners like you requesting IRS to conduct or terminate an audit or other investigation of a particular taxpayer. Section 6103, as you're familiar, protects taxpayer privacy. Yet in violation of both, the President began threatening Harvard in April, and on May 2nd, he declared, we're going to be taking away Harvard's tax-exempt status. It's what they deserve. And you've been part of the we when you said on May 23rd that you publicly declared that you were moving forward on this, that there were a substantial number of rules that Harvard may have violated. Can you tell me, yes or no, whether you can pledge to avoid any interference in IRS audits or investigations of particular taxpayers? And if you can't answer that yes or no, just say so, and then I'll move on to the next question.
Sir, that is without question that I will follow the law.
All right, sir. Can you tell us whether, yes or no, you can report back to this committee in 30 days after investigating to assure us that there have not been any requests by the President, any political appointee, or any family member of the President to direct or influence the audit or termination of an audit or investigation of any taxpayer or entity?
Well, Congressman, as you said, this is all private matters, so it would be out of line for me to report back on any of this. But I can assure you that I will follow the law and all proper procedures.
Thank you. I'm just asking you whether you can report back in 30 days whether there has been any attempt, I'm not asking for the specifics of who was involved, by the president or any of the other people I mentioned, to influence or direct any audit or investigation of a taxpayer. Can you do that, sir?
Well, I can report right here. I am not in the habit of repeating private conversations, but the president and I have never had a conversation on Harvard's tax status. So I will report that right here. We don't need 30 days.
I'm not asking just about Harvard. If they can pick on Harvard, they can pick on anyone. And I'm just asking for a simple report on whether there have been any efforts of that, whether from the president or one of his associates. And it would seem to me that would be easy to do. But let me move also to the question of privacy as it relates to data sharing. Do you agree that there is no authorization for the IRS to share tax data broadly with DOJ or federal agencies for the general purpose of data consolidation?
Section 6103 protects taxpayers' information. We have followed all proper procedures, and including in terms of the data sharing with the Department of Homeland Security. We are allowed to share taxpayers' information for those taxpayers who are believed to be criminals or have committed a crime.
I'm asking you about DOJ and its apparent effort to have an omnibus information sharing agreement with agencies. Do you agree that you cannot share taxpayer data without statutory authorization from this Congress, and you don't have any for that purpose?
We will follow the direction of the regulations and the court, sir.
Are you sharing any taxpayer information with DOJ for this omnibus information sharing agreement where they seem to probe into the privacy of every American, consolidating it with Social Security and other private information? Or is there such sharing going on now, sir?
Well, first of all, I would push back on that characterization.
You can do so.
And
I just want to know if you're sharing in the time that remains.
I will tell you, and there seems to be a misunderstanding among many people on your side of the aisle on what DOJ is. DOJ employees.
I understand you had some misunderstanding about it, and Mr. Musk yourself, but let me ask you again, just simply on the question I'm asking, are you sharing any of this data with DOJ without congressional authorization?
As I said, we are following all of the laws.
Thank you. I would appreciate an answer to my question, but I will yield back since my time has expired.
Mr. Smith is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for sharing your time here today. And I've not been around here as long as Mr. Neal has, but I do want to bring in a bit of a historical perspective that I think is relevant. Looking back, we can argue about CBO and JCT, and it's an imperfect system. And I think that's manifested itself in various hits and misses on projections, whether it goes all the way back to the original parts of the cost of Medicare that was way underestimated, or whether it was the structure of a more market-based approach with Medicare Modernization Act that precedes my time here, but actually cost a lot less than was projected. You go to the receipts, post-2017 tax action, the receipts exceeded what was projected. So we have an imperfect system, but it's what we have. And I think we need to go on that. Now, you take things a step further, and I remember the president's economic advisor, Mr. Hassett, pointing out that with COVID, yes, there was bipartisan action. I'll say that a few of those components still give me heartburn, as much as an emergency that we found ourselves in. But at the beginning of COVID, when unemployment spiked and the GDP dipped, Congress acted. By the end of 2020, GDP was back to about even. New President Biden was advised not to spend what he insisted on spending. I would suggest they're probably grappling with going back to the Obama stimulus, and they think that the only mistake of the Obama stimulus, so-called, was it didn't spend enough money, rather than address the bureaucratic approach that, the joke was already maybe wasn't what it was described to be. But we have these imperfect projection systems, and yet we've got the reality of experience. And I think this is important to note, and especially on the IRS structure and the desire to spend money on more people at the IRS, because that could generate more audits and that would generate more revenue, and then we can spend that revenue that, good grief, still wasn't enough to cover what the actual IRA costs came in and came to be. So we have to deal with these realities, and it's because they're imperfect systems that we just have to acknowledge. And that's why, Mr. Secretary, I had not heard the numbers on the IRS, and especially in these efforts most recently, that we were told that if we pushed back on the number of new IRS agents and auditors, we were going to undermine the revenues, and yet a different approach that focused more on technology, because there was a willingness to focus more on technology here on this side of the dais than there was with just hiring more people that actually, even in the best of scenarios, did not come to be. Thank goodness, I might add. But we are in a situation now where in 2017, we did what was right, and I'm glad that there was bipartisan support to extend a lot of what we did in 2017 that did not have bipartisan support then. Now, that didn't pass the Senate. We are where we are, and now heading into a situation where what we have at hand with this reconciliation bill is good for workers. Is good for workers, it's good for economic expansion and encouraging investment and increasing productivity so that we can grow the economy without triggering inflation. President Biden was warned not to push more spending by Democrats, I might add. I think of Mr. Summers primarily, advising against that. Did it anyway. We are still paying the price. We're trying to dig out from a lot of that. And that's why we're doing the bill that we are. Gosh, I have other things that I'd love to ask questions on. But I think it's important to realize that we need to deal with reality here. That's what we are doing. And Mr. Secretary, thank you. I look forward to further conversations, whether it's trade, whether it's IRS, whether it's various things that we need to do to get our country to a better place, realizing that the solutions are really in the private sector and triggering everything we can on our side to encourage the private sector to provide more opportunity. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. You know, the economic outlook of the United States has soured a bit since President Trump assumed office. We've gone from record lows in unemployment, historic growth, and lowering inflation to unprecedented trade wars, volatile markets, and low consumer sentiment. And for the record, Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter surveys from consumers from the University of Michigan, a trade war impacting the shipping economy, and the OECD article on the downward turn in economic turn in the U.S.
Without objection.
Thank you. This is only made worse by the Republicans' big, ugly bill and the administration's proposed budget. I have a few items I want to raise with you, Mr. Secretary, but given our limited time, I want to focus on the projected impact of the reconciliation legislation. Economists from the CBO, the JCT, the University of Pennsylvania, Yale University, the Committee for Responsible Budget, and the Bipartisan Policy Center have all projected that this legislation will add trillions of dollars to our national debt. Experts have also projected that close to 16 million Americans will lose access to their health care, and 11 million Americans will lose access to nutrition benefits. These figures aren't coming from Democratic talking points. They're coming from economic experts with years of expertise. Yet, Mr. Secretary, you have time and again gone public and said that you dispute these claims. I believe you're a very intelligent and very competent individual. You're a Yale graduate, an adjunct professor, served as the managing partner of the George Soros Fund Management Office in London, and led Key Square Capital Management, a global hedge fund, and you're a billionaire. So the question I have is, why is it that you seem intent on disavowing any and all expert opinions that are inconvenient to your political agenda? Unfortunately, it strikes me that you are hell-bent on ignoring the warnings of any independent expert whose opinions may not serve your goals. When you worked in finance and your analyst told you that a proposal was a bad idea, I suspect that you listened to your analysis and didn't just accept the deal because the person proposing it said they were wrong and that their deal was a good deal. That would be wrong, it would be irresponsible, and it would be dangerous. I would submit that in the position that you have now, it is even worse. It's more wrong, it's more irresponsible, and it's more dangerous. Mr. Secretary, can you point to one independent study, one study performed by an expert PhD economist who is not on the payroll of this administration that says that this legislation will not add to our national debt?
Well, Congressman, if...
Yes or no? Can you point to one?
If we want to look at the CBO, which...
No, I'm asking you, is there an independent expert that you can point to that says that this bill will not add to our national debt? Yes or no?
Yes.
There is?
Yes.
What are they?
Art Laffer.
Pardon me?
Art Laffer.
Art Laffer? Great. That I don't think that one counts. Mr. Secretary, did the 2001 Bush tax cuts add to our debt?
Sorry?
Did the 2001 Bush tax cuts add to our debt? Yes or no?
Again, Congressman,
yes or no?
I think it's important to look at framing here.
Okay, I'm reclaiming my time. It's clear that you're not going to answer the questions that are asked. And let me make it real simple for you. The Bush tax cuts added to the debt. The second round of Bush tax cuts added to our national debt. The last Trump tax cuts added to our national debt, and every expert will tell you that the proposed Trump tax cuts will also add to our national debt. That is the honest answer, and I would have expected you could have just given us a yes or no on whether or not these preposterous tax cuts that will benefit clearly the most wealthy people, the people who don't need a tax cut in this environment, will add to our national debt. This is bad public policy, it's bad for the American taxpayers, it's bad for our economy, and it's atrocious for our future in regard to the national debt, and I yield back.
Next, we have the chairman of our tax committee, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding the meeting. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here today. We get into these back and forth, and it comes down to who struck John. I think both sides of the aisle can talk about things and policies in the past that caused wherever we are today to be wherever we are today. The question isn't about the history of how we got here. The question is, how do we remedy it? How do we fix it going forward? I'm from the private sector. And I really do believe before anybody should ever serve in public office, they should have been in the private sector and worked where they got paid on commission only and had lost their job at least once and had faced an unbelievable task of trying to keep your business open when there was no revenue coming in. So I don't want to grill you and all these things of asking you a question and not allowing you to answer it, because that seems to become the thing. I'd rather go back to consistency and certainty. The hardest thing for anybody in the private sector is trying to figure out what the next administration is going to do, or what's going to happen at midterms, and whether I'm going to make an investment or not going to make an investment, because that can change overnight. I get that, and I'm sitting here now and I'm trying to figure out, no wonder hardworking American taxpayers have lost faith in the way we operate. But I just want to ask you this, because I think it's really critical. So I have kind of a little bit of a football background. I look at this, we're in the fourth quarter now, it's a 2-minute warning and no timeouts left. I want you to share with us what could happen, and forget the Potomac amnesia about who's responsible for it. Let's go to what actually is going to happen if this bill doesn't get passed. How is it going to affect hardworking American taxpayers?
Congressman, good to see you again. It is what we call in economics a sudden stop. It would be cataclysmic. It would be the largest tax hike in history. It would be a disaster for businesses, for working Americans, and for our status in the world. That to have this happen, we would see increases in taxes on thousands of dollars of working Americans. We would see business contract, and we would see a substantial increase in the unemployment rate.
So as you look at what's taking place right now, and I think there's always the back and forth about do these tariffs work, do they not work? Just from a standpoint, your background is incredible for you to be in this position today. So I want to thank you for doing that, because you stepped out of a pretty comfortable life where people weren't firing questions at you and not allowing you to answer them. Just going forward, and you told people just now what's going to happen if we don't get this passed. So what is it that, in addition to what we could do, that we're not already doing?
Congressman, it is certainty and permanence. As we have seen, the corporate tax rate is permanent. That is, we are not arguing on that here. Businesses have great certainty. Households do not. Small businesses do not. And this administration, myself especially, given my small town roots, they are laser focused that Main Street can do well here. And Main Street is a series of small business owners who work every week to make payroll. On average, 9 employees, family owned, and this would be cataclysmic for them. On the other side, having permanence, being able to invest, being able to hire more workers, being able to expand, will lead a Main Street resurgence. We will also see a manufacturing resurgence. Approximately 9% of Americans are now engaged in the manufacturing sector. History has shown us that wage growth occurs more readily in the manufacturing sector for working class Americans than in the service sector. So a combination of small business and manufacturing, along with the president's tax agenda for no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, a tax cut for seniors, and the ability to buy a new American-made car and deduct the interest, they will solve this horrendous affordability crisis. Because the way to think about it, Congressman, we are dealing with two things here. We are dealing with affordability, and we are dealing with inflation. Affordability is the stock of inflation, and we are working to pull that down. That can be pulled down two ways: through price levels or increase real wages. I think we can do both, but the real fill-up here would be increased real wages for working Americans. On the other side, we just saw yet another fantastic inflation number, much of that due to decrease in energy prices.
Thank you for being here. And again, for you to step out of your private life, which is very comfortable, to step into this arena, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being with us today and your service. We appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming before the committee as well. It's pretty clear, and listen, now, who needs to get into arguments when you need answers? And but you can see the frustration on this side. I appreciate your loyalty to the president and understanding your responsibility, but it seems pretty clear that in the time that we're given to ask a question, et cetera, the reason that people are seeking yes and no answers is because of the time that's allotted. It has nothing to do with you personally or whatever. You're obviously very bright and intelligent. So, Mr. Secretary, would you agree that I give great credit to Representative Massey, who stood on the floor and addressed the Congress during the debate on this bill, and he never criticized the president. He never criticized a fellow Republican. What he did was address the facts, and he laid them out very clearly. Let me quote what he had to say here. This bill is a debt bomb ticking. Congress can do funny math, fantasy math if it wants, but bond investors don't. This week, they sent us a message. Moody's downgraded our credit rating, and the bond investors who buy and finance our debt demanded higher interest rates on a 10-year note, 20-year note, and 30-year note. What does this mean? Very soon, the government will be paying $16,000 in interest for paying $16,000 of interest alone per U.S. family. What are we telling them instead of taking care of that problem? We are going to give them a tax break. The frustration you hear up here, of course, is that there's denial that tax breaks don't add to the national debt. Was Moody's wrong? Was Representative Massey's assessment wrong?
I can tell you that clearly Representative Massey doesn't understand the bond market, and that any 24-hour window, as he's just said, is incorrect. That I will point out that the U.S. 10-year, which I repeatedly reference, is the only major 10-year bond that has a lower yield this year. So has a lower yield today than it did on January 1st or January 20th. German yields are higher, Japanese yields are substantially higher, but U.S. 10-year yields are lower. So I'm not sure what's on Representative Massey's mind.
So Massey is wrong, and Moody's was wrong too?
Moody's, even the Democrats say that.
What do you mean, even the Democrats?
The last time that the U.S.
I don't know. What do you have to do with Moody's? You know,
in 2011, when the U.S. was downgraded, Larry Summers, then NEC head, called Moody's a lagging indicator.
Is Moody's wrong or right? Yes or no?
Moody's is a lagging indicator.
Okay,
and
so
anyone who
you can understand the frustration, and I appreciate your
Moody's
intelligence and ability to talk over. But when we're addressing the American people and we're in a hearing like this, someone as bright and as capable as you are could explain to the American people and still remain loyal to the president, loyal to our colleagues on this dais who supported the bill. There is a strong difference of opinion. And that's what is being expressed here, opinion. There's no focus or dedication on the actual facts. We'll find that out, and people on this aisle are saying, well, don't worry, there's going to be no impact on kids not getting food, 16 million people being kicked off of their health insurance. That's some mirage. That's some fictitious notion that Democrats have made up. And this national debt stuff, well, whether it's Moody's, whoever it is who has come out, whether it's the Wharton School, they're all wrong or misguided or uninformed, as Secretary Massey was. I yield back.
Mr. Schweikert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, how's the jet lag?
Been better.
Yeah, it's
been better.
Look, it's impressive, but I don't know if you get frequent flyer miles for all this traveling.
No, but I take my responsibilities of reporting to Congress very seriously.
No, we appreciate you making the effort to get here. I'm going to give you something that's a little bit different, but it's more some of the things we specialize with the Joint Economic Committee and those. We'd like to actually engage, this is probably more technical staff, on what we can do to actually, there's things we can do policy-wise, message-wise, product-wise, in regards to moving away from notes and bills and being able to create some additional interest liquidity on the bonds, moving out in the curve. With past Treasury secretaries, we've done presentations on everything from Professor Schiller's Trill's idea, where it's a bond, but it actually has a slight attachment to as an equity interest in the U.S. tax receipts, so therefore it's sympathetic with tax revenues, to things you've actually written about, or your team around you have written about, certain gold indexes and other things for long-term debt. My interest is very much, and this is a intellectual conflict many of us in Congress have, the substantial portion of growth of debt is demographics. We don't like to tell people the truth, but we have a dramatic shortage of young people in the country. Today, compared to 20 years ago, we have double the number of people 65, but our 18-year-olds are exactly the same as 20 years ago. It's demographics. And we're going to try to make demographics partisan, because that's what we do. How does someone like me work with your team to actually give you product ideas, messaging to the markets and liquidity that going along on the curve is stable, and we're going to be there to protect our full faith and credit?
Congressman, you raise a very important issue, and what you're talking about is something called the dependency ratio. The U.S. is the only major industrialized economy where that ratio is roughly stable. It is in slight decline. Many other economies, Italy, Japan in particular, they are seeing the dependency ratio blow out, and hence their productive capability. We would welcome the opportunity to engage with you and your staff on any ideas that you may have. Right now, we are committed to the regular cadence of Treasury issuance as it is. I would add that in my lifetime, and I can't believe, to go back to experts, we always see, it's this industrial revolution, it's that industrial revolution. I'm not sure whether we're on the fourth or fifth, but I do believe that we are on an industrial revolution, an AI revolution that may lead to a productivity breakthrough that could be very important.
Mr. Secretary, you're stealing one of my speeches, but synthetic biology, AI, automation, and that's actually, it's a side conversation on reindustrialization and the actual statistical information of how much of that's going to be labor substitute by automation, and therefore we may not get the same wage growth in the academic literature, but that's going to geeking out a little bit. My great interest is, I don't believe many of us on this committee have spent enough time, whether it be a Democrat in the White House, a Republican, on debt management, and the fact we on this committee have the responsibility to work with you in Treasury to have as much stability in that model. Because today we borrow, about $72,000 a second? Outside the math for extraordinary measures.
I haven't done it by second, but I think on a daily basis. But Congressman, I can tell you, the thing that would give us the greatest debt stability is the increasing the debt ceiling.
No,
because
I don't disagree with
that is a cataclysmic outcome that we will never allow to happen.
Mr. Secretary, absolutely agree. Visibility, capacity is important. But even your own numbers, in 9 years, we borrow about $100,000 a second, almost solely driven by demographics, healthcare, Medicare, and interest. I beg of you, it's hard to do in front of these microphones because it's uncomfortable to talk about, but it's math, and it's the reality of what we are as people. We need to work together to provide visibility to these debt markets. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Davis from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. Today, Secretary Bessent appears here to praise the Republican One Big Beautiful Bill. That is the most cruel, draconian, inhumane legislation that I've voted on since I've been here. Government, I seriously believe, should help people and not hurt them. I reject this bill that makes poor people poorer, sick people sicker, and hungry people hungrier. I reject this bill that rips health care from 16 million Americans, with over 498,000 Illinoisans expected to lose their health insurance, including 102,000 children and 27,000 seniors in my district alone. I reject this bill that threatens my constituent Deborah and her 2 children, whom she adopted from foster care. The picture behind me shows Deborah's children, who are medically fragile and rely solely on Medicaid for their health care. I reject this bill that will close hospitals in my district and kick people out of their nursing homes, not only in my district, but across the country, especially in urban inner city communities and rural communities for sure. I reject this bill that explodes poverty and suffering while giving wealthy trillions in tax cuts. And I reject this bill's irresponsible explosion of the deficit that triggers statutory cuts to critical programs supporting children and families. These pay-go reductions would eliminate funding for the maternal, infant, and early childhood home visiting program, known as MACV, that have proven to improve mother and child health, family safety, and child development. It would eliminate the guaranteed funding for the Mary Lee Allen Promoting Safe and Stable Families program that we know helps prevent child maltreatment and strengthen families. It would eradicate the social services block grant that provides substantial investment in child care, child welfare, and adult protective services. These egregious cuts alone will cost Illinoisans over $72 million and hurt Illinois children, seniors, and families. I reject this bill that gives tax cuts to the wealthy, paid for by denying and depriving low-income, poor people, senior citizens, sick people, unhealthy people, the health care, food assistance, housing assistance, and economic development opportunities that they need. This bill reminds me that there is something rotten in Denmark. There is something wrong with the thinking that puts such a bill in front of us. This bill is actually what we call the Robin Hood in reverse. Take from the poor, take from the disabled, take from the sick, take from the hungry, and give to the wealthy. It is not good, it is immoral. I reject it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. LaHood is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Thanks for your service to our country. I would argue, Mr. Secretary, that President Trump got elected last November on 2 issues, fixing the unmitigated disaster at our southern border and fixing the economy. And obviously you play a big role in fixing the economy and working with us on that. Go back a year ago, we had high inflation, high interest rates, unaffordable energy costs, supply chain frustrations. And that factored into people going to the polls and wanting a change on the economy. And as we think about the bill that we've put together, the One Big Beautiful Bill, there's lots of things in this bill that help this economy. But fundamental to that is making permanent things like 199A, bonus depreciation, research and development tax credit, the affordable housing tax credit, unleashing American energy, all included in this bill. And I think we predicate this bill on how do we have predictability and certainty long-term in this economy. And those investments that are made by small, medium, and large companies, whether you're a plumber in Peoria, Illinois, or you're a Fortune 100 company, you want predictability and certainty. And as been alluded to earlier, if we do nothing and this bill doesn't pass, you're going to have $4.5 trillion of tax increases. And if you think there's uncertainty in the economy now, wait until that happens. And so the other, I think, observation that's been made is there's a lot of money and resources sitting on the sidelines waiting to be invested. But we need that predictability and certainty. And I would argue we do that in this bill. I wanted to ask you if you can comment on what this bill will do to the economy and on predictability and certainty.
Good, Congressman, thank you for that. And I would also like to talk about what this bill will not do to the economy. Because what we saw in the tax bill under the Biden administration, which I believe was immoral, was rampant inflation. Rampant inflation, which is the best way to steal from working Americans. And the basket of goods and services that working Americans require had a substantially higher inflation rate than the 21% reported by the Bureau of Statistics. So in excess of 30% of purchasing power was stolen from working families. We had, in the summer of 2024, we had a record amount of food bank usage in the United States of America at the same time that the previous administration's tax bill, we had a record number of trips to Europe. And that is not an America we want. Record trips to Europe, record food bank usage. So anyone who voted for that tax bill, that was the outcome. What we are doing is trying to get back, as you said, to President Trump's private sector job growth creation. And the tax bill will incentivize private sector growth. Equally important, this administration's economic plan is a three-legged stool. It is trade, it is taxes, and it is deregulation. And what we saw under the Biden administration that created the great inflation was we saw the impetus in spending as the government flooded the zone, but we saw substantial regulatory increase, so a demand shock was met with supply constraints. What we are doing with the help of this committee and congressmen like you, we are creating a private sector demand shock that is going to be met with a deregulatory release. So we will go back to 2018 and 2019, we will have strong growth and it will be non-inflationary.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. There was no tax bill passed during the Biden administration, and I know that because I served on this committee during that administration. So I just wanted to clarify that. And in the interest of time, because our time here is limited, I'm going to ask you to please limit your answers to yes or no questions, and I'm going to jump straight into those questions. Mr. Secretary, do you still believe that the president's tariffs are going to be a one-time price adjustment for American families?
If prices go up, they will be one time.
Okay, well, unfortunately, you appear to be talking out of both sides of your mouth because you yourself have admitted after conversations with Walmart that some tariff costs are going to get passed on to consumers. And in fact, we've already seen that prices are rising on many everyday goods.
No, Congresswoman,
please don't interrupt me.
We had
the time is mine. The time is mine. Please don't interrupt me. I will ask you questions and I will grant you an opportunity to answer them, but please don't interrupt me during my time.
With pleasure.
Okay, I know I'm a woman, but please try to limit yourself to answering my questions. No, I'm sorry, but we get talked over all the time, and I don't want that to happen at this hearing.
I would remind members, the gentlelady is recognized. Please proceed.
Thank you. The time is mine. Clothing is going up 20%. Shoe prices and canned goods like chicken noodle soup and canned fruit and microwave meals have gone up 15%. Toys are getting more expensive. Walmart just raised the prices of dinosaur action figures by 38% and baby-born dolls by 43%. Household goods like drills, toolkits, vacuums have also gone up. Stanley Black & Decker recently announced higher prices for all of their products, and these are just some of the products that are affected. On average, Trump's tariffs are estimated to cost households $3,000 more for the same goods than they would have last year. And that's money that could be going to...
That's incorrect, and
that is
I'm not sure
incorrect.
who's estimated.
The best estimates are that consumers will pay $3,000 more for the same goods
and that estimate is from
that
whom?
they did last year.
That estimate's from whom,
I will
Congresswoman?
get you the estimates.
Right, because
that's money that could be going to paying goods or paying rent and groceries. And it's clear that Trump's trade wars are hurting American families, yet all we have to show for the economic pain are news reports of these flimsy trade deals. And I understand, Mr. Secretary, that you are co-leading the China trade negotiations. Do you think that China is a reliable trading partner?
I think we will see.
Well, pardon me for being skeptical of this administration's ability to get anything meaningful out of trade negotiations with China, because this administration is too swamped with trying to negotiate with 90 countries around the world. And to me, a poorly negotiated trade deal with China is probably not worth the paper that it's written on, because this is China's China's track record. These are facts. In the Trump administration's Phase 1 trade deal, China promised to increase purchases of U.S. goods and services by $200 billion over 2 years. Countless reports, and you yourself, have noted that China has failed to meet these purchase commitments. Those were purchase commitments that were negotiated by Trump in his first administration.
They met their agreements under President Trump in 2020, and President Biden did not enforce them, and the Chinese delegation told me that they did not believe they needed to adhere to them.
I'm reclaiming my time. That's incorrect. China has also not made the structural reforms that they promised Trump that they would. Many U.S. companies still reported widespread intellectual property theft and counterfeiting. So excuse me if the last attempt by the Trump administration to secure meaningful change from China doesn't exactly inspire any confidence in the current negotiations. And, quite frankly, negotiating trade agreements with China requires more time and effort than this administration has given so far. And that's why I was alarmed to hear this morning that Trump said that the U.S.-China deal was done after just 2 days of talks in London. Mr. Secretary, the press release on this so-called deal looks more like a framework. Congress, who has the constitutional authority over trade, needs the details of this supposed deal. So I'm asking if you will provide this committee with the actual details of this deal, because there has been, unlike what was said earlier, there has been no consultation with our side of the aisle, at least, on the China negotiation. Will you commit to giving us the specifics of that deal, the details?
Congresswoman, I flew back at 4 a.m. this morning to be here this morning, and we are...
It's a simple yes or no question.
No, it is not a simple yes or no question. We are in the midst of constructing it, and back to your question, China has proven an unreliable partner in strategic...
Will you commit to consulting with us on trade deal with China?
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
I would ask the witness be allowed to answer that last
Gentlewoman's
question.
time has expired.
It's a yes or no question. It's very simple.
Representative, I raised many of your concerns to the Chinese delegation, and it will be a longer process. The trade deal today, or last night, was for a specific goal, and it will be a much longer process. And I will note that the previous administration did nothing.
But excuse me, the
Mr.
question
Arrington
was
is
whether
now
or not you
recognized.
would
The gentleman's
consult with
time has
members of
expired.
Congress.
Mr. Arrington's time
It's my time
is
now.
now Mr. Arrington's time, 5 minutes.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for your service. I think my best contribution now in 5 minutes is to separate fact from fiction and help debunk some of these tired, old, baseless, and false claims from my Democrat colleagues. Let's start with Ms. Sanchez and her claim that they didn't pass the tax bill. That's not wrong. That is completely false. The Inflation Reduction Act was a tax and spending bill. They levied taxes on corporations. They increased taxes on stock buybacks. It was a tax and spend bill. We marked it up in the tax committee. What you won't find, though, Mr. Secretary, is a tax increase on the billionaires. You won't find a tax increase in their tax bill on millionaires. They didn't raise the tax rate for the top 10%, the top 20%, the top 30%. They didn't raise taxes on their millionaire. They didn't create the wealth tax that they're going to criticize us for. In fact, we're preventing all marginal rates from increasing by extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and including the top rate from going to 39% from 37%. They didn't increase it from 37% to 39%. They had total Democrat control, and they didn't do it. Feign indignation is what that is. Now, let's go through some more facts. If we don't pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act because they're successful in stopping it, there'll be a 22% on average tax increase for all Americans. Is that true or false?
True.
They'll lose about $5,000, $6,000, the median household income. They'll lose about $5,000, $6,000 of their family budget. True or false?
At least that amount.
Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Did the top 10%, did the top 1% pay a greater share of taxes after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
A much higher percentage, sir.
Did the top 1% that paid 38% of the entire cost of the federal government actually, after TCJA, pay a higher percentage of the cost of the federal government, going from 38% to 45%? True or false?
Yes, sir, 7% more.
And the top 10% was paying 70%. Top 10% earners in this country pay 70% of the freight of the federal government. After the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they are now paying 75%. Is that true or false?
It is correct.
So another false claim during the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passage was that this was a tax cut for the rich and for corporations. Is it true or false that the Washington Post gave the Democrats 4 Pinocchios, saying $3 out of $4 in the tax cuts benefited individuals, not corporations?
I don't read the Washington Post.
Well, they gave 4 Pinocchios. Even the Washington Post could not tolerate that misleading and false claim. The bottom 10%, wages grew twice as fast as the top 10. True or false after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
Yes, sir, and household net worth increased substantially faster for the bottom 50%.
True or false, did the poverty rate sink to an all-time record low after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
Yes, sir.
Did we have the lowest unemployment rate among minorities and women after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
Yes, sir.
How can these things be true and what they're saying true, Mr. Secretary?
I will leave that to
the American people.
To the American people.
Because this is empirical data.
Who had a referendum on November 5th.
They sure did. And this is empirical data. These are verifiable facts. Now, let's move to this notion. I got a minute left, that somehow we've increased the national debt in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Forget for a minute that they, under their control, full Democrat control, added $8 trillion, and under President Biden, $8 trillion to the national debt. 40-year inflation, soaring interest, all because of their failed economic policies, paying people not to work, expanding welfare without work requirements, taxes, barrage of regulation, record regulatory cost on small businesses, and the list goes on, okay? And we've all suffered, especially working people. As you said, it was a regressive tax, that 20+% increase in the cost of essential goods and services. But if you take CBO's static scores, the cost of the bill is about $4.16 trillion. If you take the $1.7 trillion in savings, the largest spending reduction in the history of the United States by twofold, and you put a conservative growth rate, because CBO's growth rate is 1.8 in their baseline. That 1.8 is based on the last 4 years of failed economic policies and unbridled spending. It's not based on the policies embedded in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. President Trump grew the GDP by 1 percentage point from 1.8 to 2.8. Even Joe Biden had an annual average of 2.7. We put 2.6 in there as an assumption, which yields $2.6 trillion. The net effect is we reduced the deficit and then some.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate you being here. God bless America and go West Texas.
The gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Ms. Sewell for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Treasurer, Secretary of the Treasury. I actually, with all due respect, only get 5 minutes, so I'm going to ask, my constituents have sent me a list of questions that they just want yes or no answers to, and out of respect for the time and the fact that they want some clarity, I hope that you'll just say yes or no. The first question is, will the big, beautiful bill add to the national debt? Yes or no? Is that a yes or a no? That's a no? Yes?
Sorry?
What did you say? I'm sorry.
It remains to be seen.
Well, I mean, look, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office official score of this bill says that it increases the federal deficit by $2.4 trillion.
Sorry to interrupt, Congresswoman, but the CBO also said that tariff income over the 10-year window would be $2.8 trillion.
You know,
so that would be
you want to talk about
dynamic
scoring and all that
There's
stuff.
nothing dynamic about that. You're quoting the CBO, I'm quoting the CBO, so let's level set.
We can level set, but the reality is that I have constituents back home who are really scared. They're scared that prices have gone up. This administration has promised that prices will go down. That absolutely has not occurred for them. And every time they hear the word tariff, they think of the fact that it's another tax on them that will be passed on to them for goods and services. At any rate, not only did the CBOs say that this bill will increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion. The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget said $2.5 trillion. The Yale Budget Lab, $2.4 trillion. The point I'm trying to make is that you will add to the national debt over the span of this time. The second question that they wanted me to ask is, will all Americans have a net benefit from this beautiful big bill?
It is it's difficult to.
Yes or no?
Again, it's impossible to say all Americans. It is ridiculous for me to give an answer for 337 million.
Well, I can tell you what a lot of
I can say the balance of probability is that Americans will get a substantial increase, especially if you're referring to working people in your district.
Yep.
They should do very well, as they did in 2018 and 2019.
Tables tell us? You know, the distribution the numbers don't lie. The average tax cut in 2027 for people in this bill making $1 million is about $81,500. So someone who makes $1 million, and no one in my district makes $1 million, to my knowledge, will get a tax increase, will get a tax benefit of $81,000. That's $223 a day. Now, the average tax rate in 2027 for people making under $50,000, which in my district is about 63% of the people that I represent, they will only get a tax break or tax increase of $265, which is 73 cents per day. That's pittance. When you think about the fact that the IRS, which this administration has decimated, closing field offices everywhere, laying off or dismissing thousands of workers from the IRS. The folks in my district often get, bombarded with inquiries about their earned income tax credits, and billionaires that are going to get $81,500 more don't. So, I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is that Not all Americans will benefit the same. We know that because people make different things. But the fact of the matter is, if you're only saving me $268 and you're taking away my health care, you're taking away my health, which 16 million Americans will have no health care, will lose their health care, and they have to lose their health care in order for you guys to actually pay for your bill. I mean, to pay for your bill by kicking people off health insurance and giving them no health care, to me, is immoral and not fair. The last question that I was asked to ask you was, when will we hit the debt ceiling? I know that this big, beautiful bill also means a increase in the debt ceiling. And frankly, I heard you say that that is something that's an imperative. I would agree with that. When do we foresee us hitting the debt ceiling?
Congresswoman, I want to congratulate you. You have a very sophisticated constituency to ask questions like this. That the so-called X date is a...
With all due respect, just because you're poor doesn't mean you're ignorant.
As I said, very sophisticated.
Yeah.
It was
so can you answer the question? Because we want to know. I'd like to know whether or not.
I'm in the habit of saying thank you to compliments. That the so-called X date is a moving target.
So when do you you're the Secretary of Treasury. So tell me, when do you predict, given where we are right now, will we hit the ceiling?
Some point in the middle to late summer.
Is that August, July?
Again, it is imprecise.
Well, sir, I just think that it is an abomination that we are actually giving bigger tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans who don't need a tax cut.
The gentleman's time
Meanwhile,
has expired.
we're taking away food assistance and health care from people who desperately need it.
Gentlewoman's time
Thank you,
has
and I yield
expired.
back.
I now recognize Mr. Estes for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary Bessent. Thank you.
That was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent taking questions from lawmakers concerning the one big, beautiful bill. And within that bill is a House GOP proposal backed by President Trump that would create tax-deferred investment accounts for newborns. Dubbed Trump accounts, babies born in the U.S. over the next 4 years would start with $1,000. Once those babies turn 18, they would be able to withdraw the money to put toward a down payment for a home, education, or to start a small business. If the money is used for other purposes, it would be taxed at a higher rate. And the White House on Monday, Trump called the idea a pro-family initiative. The president was joined by Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon, Dell CEO Michael Dell, and others who praised the proposal. House Speaker Mike Johnson attended as well, adding, quote, "Trump accounts are all about setting up the next generation for success." And the House Ways and Means Committee Chair Jason Smith says the accounts will give American children a strong start at life. And to discuss the $1,000 investment accounts for newborns, we've got Tim Dosher joining us. Tim, thanks for being here. He's the Executive Director of Unleashed Prosperity. Tim, thanks for making the time here. So what would make the biggest impact out of these baby bonds?
Well, I think what it is it's a change in culture that this country desperately needs. Think about this. I mean, think about you're able to now give these accounts to these kids. You don't have to go find the account. It's already set up. So you've got skin in the game right away as soon as you're there. And you're able to not just have the $1,000 one time. Your family's able to contribute up to $5,000 every single year in addition to that $1,000. So you are looking at a compounding effect that could mean a huge deal, like you said, when you come 18 and you're able to see what's in that account. It's a big deal.
Okay, Tim, so now we're talking about maybe $3 billion a year this program would cost. That's according to the Washington Post analysis, assuming there's maybe 3 to 4 million newborns each year, right? So that's small in compared to the actual budget of the United States government. But who's paying for this? I mean, it's got to be taxpayers.
Well,
and is it a redistribution of wealth?
Well, look, it's a great angle. And yeah, we're going to have to deal with that issue. I mean, is it something that we want to give the federal government additional power and authority over? And that's a huge question that's being talked about right now throughout our side of the aisle. Do we want the federal government to have another reason or another thing that they could potentially take from? You know, we've heard that they've taken from Social Security. Money's fungible. And so this is a debate that we're having right now. And so we're just going to have to weigh it out to see, is this $3.6 billion or $4 billion or whatever it is that worth the potential shift in culture that we could see? bringing people into the market, giving them something to own and manage themselves, not the federal government.
Okay, Tim, so you get $1,000 up front, you turn 18, by over that time, if it's 7%, AP estimates that's like $3,500. Again, that's with no additional contributions from maybe nonprofits or from the parents or anything. Is that enough to realistically jumpstart something like a small business?
Well, I think that what you're going to see is when you're 18 is, at least when I was 18, having money that I could put toward something, having money, an additional thing, so you graduate and you're on your own and you literally have been living off of your parents' generosity, most people, and then you have, what do you have? You have student loans. You have student loans to pay for food. You have student loans to pay for books. You have student loans to pay for education. You have all of these things. To have that money and to have the ability to contribute more to it. The idea is the account's set up. All you got to do is contribute to it. If parents are interested in helping their kids do this, saying, hey, you work a summer job, you're going to put 10% of that toward this account. You're never going to see that 10%.
And maybe they'll match it.
Which a bunch of employers and major corporations have already said. So again, you talk a little bit more about changing the culture and what that means, and you're seeing what that could potentially look like. It's not just the $1,000. That's just the start. It's the what comes after that really matters.
Okay, Tim, so now we got to talk about the wealth gap. The Urban Institute is saying it's going to widen it. Because look, California, other states, they've done these baby bonds, but it was only for those low-income families. But this would be blanket. Any income bracket would qualify. So maybe those wealthier parents might be able to add more. They're saying it's going to widen the wealth gap. What do you say?
Well, look, this is a private account. This is their own account. So this isn't some government program that you're putting money into. This is an account that you're assigned. It's going to be pegged to the market, and you're going to be seeing growth. You're going to be the one that can log on and see it. You're the one that can see it. So if you want to have the perspective of, well, look, this is only going to benefit the wealthy people, well, I think you're fundamentally misunderstanding the whole entire purpose of this, which is individual ownership. This isn't the government, and then you eventually see what it comes, like Social Security. One thing that I would say is this. If we actually wanted to do this at a federal level, what if we actually put, from between, the young ages, we suspended the payroll tax on young people, maybe up to a certain age, maybe 25, 18 to 25 or 14 to 25. Suspend the payroll tax, put that into one of these accounts, let them do that. That would be a huge boon to business. That would be a huge boon to the people that are working. It rewards work. And it would be a much bigger number than just the 1,000 plus the 5 that you could contribute. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but I think the Urban Institute may just be a little short-sighted in the culture that this creates.
Really interesting. And statistics show that there are a lot more Americans who ran their own business in years past than the present day here. But now let's talk about whether or not people are going to actually spend the money for what it's intended, because we don't know what's going to happen. But now if the program's set up in such a way that you get taxed if you don't use it on things like starting a business, education, right? A down payment on the home, is that enough incentive to ensure that the money's spent the right way?
Well, I think that's all going to come through the education that we get through this thing. Now, this is still being ferreted out. This is still being worked out. So we'll see all the details that come from that. But what I'll say is that if you have this money, if you have the guidelines and the strictures, that's what you're going toward. If this is for college, that's what you're moving toward. If you do this, then you're going to have this tax burden. Well, they're going to know it. They will know it. I mean, if you sign up for a retirement account and you withdraw early, you got the penalties. You've got the penalties that you got to pay. And that's what's going to happen if you withdraw early or if you spend this outside of the intended purpose that they had for you. There is a penalty, and you will pay it, and it will be paid through that account. So, if somebody says, hey, I've got $10,000 in there, withdraw it early, and then they only get, whatever the penalty is. Again, we're figuring that out. They're figuring that out at this point. It could be less.
Okay, well, now let's talk about this from a little bit of a wider angle. You got SNAP benefits. Some are saying that the Republicans are trying to cut them, but Republicans frame it as, hey, no, we're just trying to do it the way that it was intended. So you got SNAP, supplemental nutrition, on the chopping block per se, or not per se, but it is. And then you have this, this baby bond, right? So it's like, now you look at Brendan Duke. He's a senior director at the Center of Budget and Policy. He says that, policy priorities, he says that, look, these low-income Americans, they're not necessarily like all gung-ho about baby bonds. They just don't want their ability to buy groceries to be cut. So how do you reconcile the two?
Well, I think that, I don't think anybody is advocating cutting groceries or SNAP benefits for people who need them. I don't think so. I think the only talk that we're talking about is welfare reform, Medicaid reform for people who should be in the workforce, who should be working, who don't need it, or who should be producing in society. So I don't think anybody's really talking about that, at least not that I have heard. So I don't even want to dignify some that we're talking about cutting SNAP benefits. Now, I will say this. Trump did an incredible SNAP benefit cut in his first term. And we saw, because we wanted to address the labor force, we've got 7.5 million open jobs right now. We have to fill these jobs if we want to keep growing the economy. And so you've got this great motivation to say, let's move people that don't need it off, and let's keep people on that need it, but also give them another route of private ownership, not relying on the government for your sustenance.
Well, Tim Dozier, a very fascinating talk, Executive Director at Unleash Prosperity. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Excellent. And for round-the-clock original news coverage, you can watch us live at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app, and we'll cover more stories for you right after this break.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Kids love it. Parents trust it. Obviously. Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Ganjiong Campus courses led by expert educators. This is spectacular. Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more. Wow. All while having fun. Perfect. Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
Say goodbye to harsh, bitter coffee and hello to a delicious, smooth brew. With specialty quality beans, expertly roasted in-house, you'll taste the difference with every sip. Fermented with a blend of 50 enzymes, Days Coffee delivers a rich brew like no other. Made with the highest grade specialty beans available, you're sure to taste the difference. Elevate your morning with Days Enzyme Fermented Coffee.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
If you love them enough to crawl into a play place to get them to come down, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
Yeah, so there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. Protests erupt in multiple cities across the country. What Texas is doing to stay ahead of the game. And a federal judge refused to immediately grant a request by California Governor Gavin Newsom as state and federal officials butt heads. A federal appeals court in New York heard arguments today in President Trump's bid to erase his criminal conviction. The U.S. and China make a deal after 2 days of trade talks in London. More on the terms of the agreement and the comment from President Trump. Tech billionaire Elon Musk said he regrets recent posts about President Trump saying they went too far. So where does their relationship stand now? House Speaker Mike Johnson says it will be the honor of a lifetime to address Israel's parliament later this month.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, June 11th. I'm Stephania Cox. Inflation rose slightly last month as the cost of groceries ticked higher. This suggests that price increases may return as global tariffs affect the economy. A Labor Department report released today said that consumer prices increased 2.4% in May compared with a year ago. That's up from a 2.3% yearly increase in April. Grocery prices rose 0.3% from April to May. They've gone up 2.2% in the past year. Fruits and vegetables, breakfast cereals, and frozen foods all rose in price. Egg costs fell 2.7%. It's their second straight drop, though they're still more than 40% more expensive than a year ago. President Trump said today, repeated his view that the Federal Reserve should cut interest rates by 1 percentage point. He said the latest inflation figures were great. And an appeals court today heard arguments over whether President Trump's New York criminal conviction should be moved to federal court. Trump was convicted in July on 34 counts of falsifying business records. The president's attorney tried for the third time to convince a court to transfer the state criminal case to a federal court. They first requested the transfer in 2023 before the trial began, and again after the conviction, but the state court rejected both requests. Trump wants the federal appeals court to take control of the criminal case and then ultimately decide his appeal of the verdict. His attorney again argued that the case should have been tried in a federal court because some of the evidence presented in the state court case involved conduct while Trump was in his first term of office. They asked the appellate panel to once and for all decide whether prosecutions of former or current presidents should be in federal courts. The New York prosecutor wants the case to remain in state court. The U.S. and China have struck a deal on trade at talks in London. President Trump confirmed today that the deal with China is done. He said on Truth Social that Beijing will supply magnets and rare earth minerals to the U.S. In return, the U.S. will allow Chinese students to attend American colleges and universities. He added, quote, "We are getting a total of 55% tariffs. China is getting 10%. Trump said the deal is subject to final approval by himself and China's communist leader, Xi Jinping. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick spoke early this morning after 2 days of intense negotiations.
So the idea is we're going to go back and speak to President Trump and make sure he approves it. They're going to go back and speak to President Xi and make sure he approves it. And if that is approved, we will then implement the framework that we have worked hard over these last 2 days.
Lutnick said the new agreement put meat on the bones of the Geneva deal that had faltered over China's curbs on the export of critical rare earth minerals. Now Lutnick says those restrictions will be removed as a fundamental part of the new framework. He said that some recent US export restrictions would also be lifted. Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Li Chenggang also spoke to reporters. He confirmed that agreement had been reached and said both sides would now report back to national leaders. Markets gave the news a cautious welcome, with Asian stocks posting modest gains in Wednesday trade.
Victory for the Trump administration's tariffs plan, at least for now. A federal appeals court ruled yesterday the government can keep many of its tariffs on China and other countries while legal challenges play out. The appeals court said the case raised issues of exceptional importance. The court is therefore taking the rare step of having the 11-member court hear the appeal instead of it going before a 3-judge panel first. It scheduled arguments for late July. The Court of International Trade ruled last month the president exceeded his authority to impose tariffs after he claimed a national emergency. The Trump administration appealed, leading to yesterday's ruling. And the curfew imposed on downtown Los Angeles was lifted this morning as protests enter their 6th day. This followed overnight chaos after demonstrators defied the curfew following looting and violence. Meanwhile, a federal judge has rejected Governor Gavin Newsom's request to immediately block federal troops from the city. Here's more.
The federal judge did not immediately rule on the California governor's request to block the Trump administration from deploying federal troops in Los Angeles. Governor Gavin Newsom's request argues Trump's mobilization of the National Guard is unlawful, as the section it invoked can only be used in cases of rebellion or situations where regular forces are unable to enforce the law. Newsom argued what's happening in LA doesn't qualify as a rebellion, that the federal government bypassed the governor. He also argued it might be in violation of a law barring active duty military personnel and federalized National Guard from civilian law enforcement known as the Posse Comitatus Act. However, U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer has given the Trump administration more time to respond until 11 a.m. Wednesday. He also granted Newsom an additional day to respond to the administration's response. Meanwhile, LA Mayor Karen Bass has announced a curfew in the city's downtown areas. Bass said Tuesday 23 businesses across downtown LA had been locked Monday night.
So my message to you is, if you do not live or work in downtown LA, avoid the area. Law enforcement will arrest individuals who break the curfew, and you will be prosecuted.
The curfew went into effect at 8 p.m. Tuesday and lasted until 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. Bass said she expected the curfew to last for several days. However, protests continued through the night, with groups violating the order. The LAPD said on social media it was carrying out mass arrests. But Bass also said what's happening downtown is not affecting the rest of the city.
I think it is important to point this out, not to minimize the vandalism and violence that has taken place there. It has been significant, but it is extremely important to know that what is happening in this 1 square mile is not affecting the city.
Meanwhile, LA's Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hatami said Tuesday on Newsmax the situation demands cooperation between local and federal agents. His comments came after clashes between protesters and law enforcement over the weekend.
So here's the thing. If we can't protect law enforcement, even federal law enforcement, and if we can't detain individuals who are here illegally who have committed violent crimes, well, then you're going to need other departments and organizations to help.
He argued LA's sanctuary city status makes it impossible for the kind of cooperation required. He also delivered a message to protesters saying anyone caught engaging in violence and criminal activity will be hit with the full force of the law.
Here's the thing. Looting is a crime, and you're going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for that. Committing arson is a crime. Assaulting the police is a crime. Launching fireworks at them, launching fireworks at horses, throwing Molotov cocktails at them, lighting cars on fire, ramming your motorcycle or car into police officers, throwing rocks at police cars, regular cars, or police officers. All those are crimes.
President Trump, meanwhile, has also weighed in, vowing to keep the military inside LA until there's peace on the streets.
If there's peace, we get out. If there's even a chance of no peace, we stay there until there's peace.
As all of this unfolds, the FBI says it's investigating who might be funding the protests. FBI Director Kash Patel told Just the News, quote, "The FBI is investigating any and all monetary connections responsible for these riots."
Videos circulating online show multiple stores in downtown LA being looted Monday night, with windows smashed at the Apple and Adidas stores and merchandise stolen. Attorney General Pam Bondi addressed the issue this morning.
Well, sure. Right now, it's keeping California safe. If Gavin Newsom isn't going to keep California safe, we are. You know, they imposed a curfew last night. I think that helped a bit. But today, we wanted them to declare, they didn't declare an economic disaster out there with all of the businesses. Had they done that, Kelly Loeffler and the Small Business Association could have come in and helped, given federal aid to all of these businesses in California. We've been seeing on the news all of these drugstores getting robbed, getting looted. The Apple store just got raided. I mean, we're all watching this live on the news. And this isn't just looting to me. You think people just run in, take something, leave, and nothing happens? We're using the Hobbs Act. We are charging robbery to protect Californians under this. If you loot a store, we are going to charge you with robbery under the Hobbs Act, and you're looking at maximum 20 years in prison. But we're going to prosecute you for that. Right now in California, what we're doing is working by bringing in the National Guard, by bringing in the Marines right now to back them up, to protect our federal buildings, to protect the highways, to protect the citizens. So right now in California, we're at a good point. We're not scared to go further. We're not frightened to do something else if we need to.
Meanwhile, Vivek Ramaswamy and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis criticized California as being unsafe and mismanaged. Governor Gavin Newsom said yesterday that state and local law enforcement were mostly successful in maintaining order despite a few incidents. He added that California is no stranger to episodes of civil unrest. Here's Newsom.
If you incite violence or destroy our communities, you're going to be held to account. That kind of criminal behavior will not be tolerated. Full stop. Already more than 220 people have been arrested, and we're reviewing tapes to build additional cases, and people will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Elon Musk steps back from his recent feud with President Trump. He said on X that he regrets some of his posts about Trump. Musk wrote on his social media platform X, quote, "I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week." He said they went too far. He did not say which specific posts he was talking about, though he has deleted several that were critical of Trump. One of those signaled support for impeaching the president. Musk's relationship with Trump deteriorated in public fashion last week as the two men traded jibes on social media. Musk slammed Trump's tax and domestic policy bill, labeling it a disgusting abomination. In a phone conversation with the New York Post, Trump commented on Musk's apology. He said, quote, "I thought it was very nice that he did that." As California moves to try to stop the Trump administration from sending troops and National Guardsmen to the LA riots, we break down the political and legal implications and possible paths forward. And a fashion influencer who regularly criticizes the Trump administration admits he's in the country illegally in an X post. The administration responds. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is removing all 17 members of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Vaccine Advisory Panel. He says new members will be announced soon.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
Divinely inspired traditional oil painting inspires compassion. Artwork created in truth and beauty illuminates a path to goodness. Rediscover traditional art, revive classical culture. We warmly invite oil painters from around the world to participate in the 7th NTD International Figure Painting Competition, a celebration of classical realism. Please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
What if kids in America didn't have to go to bed hungry tonight? What if our moms, dads, and grandparents could put healthy food on the table every day to help us grow strong? What if all of our friends and neighbors had fresh food too, and there was no hunger at all in America? And what if there was a way today for you to help? Call now or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day. So many of us don't have enough food to eat, but your monthly gift means families across the country and in your community can fill plates with food. Kids can get healthy meals year-round, even when school's out, and our neighbors can have fresh food. Food that moms, dads, entire families need to thrive. But right now, more people are facing hunger. Feeding America works from coast to coast with partner food banks, food pantries, and meal programs. It takes all of us to make that happen. Will you help too? Please call the number on your screen or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give just $19 a month, and we'll send you this free canvas grocery bag. It's our way of saying thank you for helping to end hunger for our neighbors. Because no kid, no mom or dad, nobody should go hungry in America. Nobody. So what if today was the day you could help nourish futures for our friends, our families, for all of us? Ending hunger is possible. What if we end it together? Call or give online today at helpfeedingamerica.org and your gift can be doubled. Thank you.
Welcome back. Los Angeles isn't the only city seeing unrest. Protests have erupted in other cities, including Philadelphia, San Francisco, Seattle, and Chicago. Footage showed demonstrators gathering in Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and New York, calling for unity in support of immigrants. In Austin, Texas, protesters gathered outside a federal building. Police say some individuals threw rocks, tossed scooters and barricades into roads. Multiple arrests were made and 4 officers were injured. In Chicago, crowds flooded the streets and several confrontations were reported between demonstrators and police. Activists say more and larger demonstrations are planned nationwide this weekend. Counter-protests also occurred. In Los Angeles, one man wearing a red Make America Great Again hat exchanged heated words with protesters. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott says the Texas National Guard will be deployed across the state to ensure law and order. Abbott says peaceful protest is legal, but harming people or property is not and will lead to arrest. The governor says National Guardsmen will use every tool and strategy to help law enforcement maintain order. In the wake of California's lawsuit against the Trump administration over its federalization of National Guard troops, what are the arguments for and against, and where's it likely to go from here? As the protests spread and the implications of this case do too, we're joined by panelists Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and the host of the Can We Please Talk podcast, and Gerard Felitti, senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. Gerard, Mike, good to have you both with us. Gerard, let's start with examining California's lawsuit. The California National Guard were unilaterally federalized. California is arguing that this deployment violates the 10th Amendment, which protects state sovereignty, and that the governor's consent is needed for such an action. How do you think this will be weighed in the courts?
Well, I think first we need to see what the Trump administration files today at noon in response to this motion by the governor for an injunction. I think that will lay out the administration's arguments much more clearly. Ultimately, the president does have authority under federal law, under Title 10, to federalize the National Guard and use them in certain circumstances. The argument here is that one of those circumstances applies. We have yet to see which particular section he is relying on for this authority. Governor Newsom, on the other hand, is saying that the president needs state consent. That is an argument, that is something that is provided for under Article 10, under Title 10, that there are conditions under which a state should be consenting to the use of National Guard troops. However, the issue ultimately here comes down to what these troops are being used for. If they're being used to prevent violence against law enforcement activities, but not engage in law enforcement activities, then the Trump administration has a strong argument that this is something that Title 10 allows the president to do.
All right. And Mike, while Trump has not yet invoked the Insurrection Act, the law does give him broad authority to decide whether it's necessary. If he does indeed decide to invoke this act, how could such a move perhaps sway public opinion on these protests?
Yeah, the way you landed the plane on the question, Steph, is the $64,000 question, right? Because the Insurrection Act wasn't even invoked on January 6th back in 2021 when we saw what happened with respect to government property and people losing their lives and police officers attacked. So it would be a little hypocritical. Steph, for the audience out there, I want to give a couple of numbers here, and maybe Gerard could kind of piggyback on the legal argument that maybe California will make. 50 arrests, 6 police officers attacked, aggravated assault charges for a few folks out there protesting. What protest am I speaking about? I'm speaking about the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl parade that just happened a few months ago in Philadelphia. And that's to a police department that has over 5,500 troops, right, at their deployment, and they're ready. And no National Guard was summoned for that. And we saw acts of violence, as I just mentioned there, people charged in the streets. Now, again, these protests, a bigger county, Los Angeles County, has over 8,800 police officers. I just heard Jim O'Donnell speak earlier yesterday in conjunction with the mayor, where he was asked about the potential provocation of more National Guard troops being deployed, potentially more Marines, now 4,700 potentially at his disposal. Did that escalate things? And he couldn't give a straight answer with respect to all of this. But one of the things that he did emphasize is that our police officers are trained to handle this. And I just mentioned the sheer numbers and volumes of Los Angeles. This is not a small city. This is not a rural town. This is a very big city that can handle this type of protest. Now, again, could they do it better with respect to having federalized troops at the president's discretion? Yes, of course. But the chain of command in all of this has always worked, from left to right, which is local law enforcement. Hey, we need help. State, we're at our limit. We need federalized National Guard to be deployed. It's only happened maybe 2 other times in our nation's history with respect to civil rights movement. So, again, how we will look at this politically, it depends on where you fall, if there's an R or a D next to your name, because some people will say this is a provocation tactic. LA has this kind of under control already. We've seen already them put the curfew into place. Other people will argue, like Pam Bondi was in the recent hit before I came on, the segment, she was saying, we're watching this on TV and it's unfolding, and we needed to step in and do something before this got out of control like it did back in 2020 during the George Floyd protests. So it all depends on what side of the argument you land on with this, Steph.
And thanks for that, Mike. So, Gerard, I do want to hear your response in terms of the political elements here, but also in terms of the legal elements of this Insurrection Act. California, in this particular suit, is saying that this act should be used for military deployment, but it's also saying that the circumstances in the Los Angeles protests and riots do not qualify for such for invoking that act. Do you believe, under the circumstances, and also what is required under this act to invoke it?
Well, first, going back to something Leon said, it's very telling. There's a difference between a one-off, a riot or an incident or clashes with police over a Super Bowl win or a sports win, which has a finite end, and something that is a ongoing federal law enforcement operation to crack down on violations of immigration law. The problem in California is that this is not a one-off. It's not one incident in response to one arrest. This is a series of ongoing arrests that the federal government wants to make, which is generating outrage in the California community, but more than outrage, it's leading to violence. We do see people engaging with police officers. We now know that the FBI put on its top 10 list someone who was throwing rocks at police vehicles, like federal police vehicles. The issue from Donald Trump's perspective is that these individuals are not immediately being arrested. You're watching videos of people dancing on burning cars, and you don't see law enforcement moving in to arrest them. That's what strengthens his argument that local and state law enforcement is not able to keep up with what's going on and why the National Guard is needed. Now, for the Insurrection Act, there would, of course, be a valid reason to invoke that if there is an insurrection, if there is a rebellion against the government that is not being able to be put down or restrained by state agencies. However, he doesn't need to invoke the Insurrection Act so long as the National Guard is limited to protecting law enforcement, not actually engaging in arrests. Now, if he wants to send the National Guard into buildings to arrest people, then he does need to invoke the Insurrection Act, and I think that will open a host of problems for him politically.
Now, Mike, I want to look at the FBI saying that it's investigating possible links between these riots and protests and external funding. If links are discovered, how might that impact the conversation around these protests?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll impact it tremendously, obviously, because if there is, influence into these protesters and these agitators, Gavin Newsom has already mentioned, you have a right to peacefully protest, but if you're out there committing acts of violence, like Gerard said, and throwing bricks and stuff like that at police officers, you will be dealt with. So if there is something that's uncovered from the FBI's perspective with agitation and if somebody paying for these agitators and the escalation of it, I hope they're prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But just real quick, going back to what Gerard said, and I agree with what you're saying, Gerard, about the sports point, and there's a finite end. But my point is that everyone knows there's an overwhelming of the system when a team wins a Super Bowl. And then there's a parade that's planned maybe a day or two afterwards. The system in Philadelphia could be overwhelmed because of how many people are out on the streets celebrating a win. And I just gave you the statistics that match up to a 5-day total that's happening in Los Angeles. And Philadelphia did not need the National Guard to handle that parade or the people coming out to celebrate the Eagles' win. Whereas Los Angeles has a bigger police jurisdiction. They have 3,000 more police officers. And again, we both agree it's within this president's right, within the executive branch's right to federalize the National Guard. 100%, it's within his right. What I'm saying is that there is a chain of command here, and state and local said that this would lead to more agitation. More police on the street means more agitation. And to Steph, to your point, it's really, are people being paid to agitate? Well, if you find out that there's more law enforcement that's going to be available where you can make more of a mark, I'm not advocating for this, by the way, but if you find out you can make more of a mark, I think that would lead to more agitation, whereas opposed to local officials were saying, we've got this covered. We have 8,800, police officers within our disposal. Los Angeles has a lot of weaponry, let's be honest, from a police. You're seeing it here in the imagery. They have a lot of weaponry at their disposal to handle these protests. In 1992, when the Rodney King riots happened, again, they planned for more people, and that was somebody that was violently beaten, luckily lived from that, on camera, and there was riots and people in the street. And so the California governor was like, we need the National Guard for this. So my whole, one-to-one argument was really about we're seeing an overwhelming of the system for a parade, for a planned victory in a smaller city, and they were able to handle the mass amount of people and almost the same number of arrests and attacks. And I get what you're saying about there is a finite end to it, but I think that there needs to be a chain of command that's followed here. And I think that's what Gavin Newsom is not relaying from a public messaging perspective. I think he's obviously attacking the president a little bit more. I think there needs to be more of that relayed, that there's a chain of command. We didn't need the National Guard. We still don't need them because we have this situation under control.
Gerard, final remarks.
The issue is also that the governor of California and local officials have for years said that they don't want the enforcement of federal law. For years, they have shown that they are not eager through progressive policies to enforce all laws equally. We saw that at other protests and riots that have broken out. So the semblance, the view from Washington, D.C. is that this police, yes, there should be a chain of command. Absolutely. It should be the governor that decides if the National Guard is needed. But the rhetoric that's been coming out of L.A. and California has been thumbing the noses at federal law enforcement, essentially, and not doing everything that they could be doing to step up. I think that's really the issue. It's a political dynamic between Newsom and progressives in California and Donald Trump, and that is affecting the view of whether California is doing enough or not. And ultimately, that is a political question. I think the legal one will be decided in the president's favor.
All right. Mike Leon, Gerard Filitti, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Next, House Speaker Mike Johnson will head to Israel soon. Johnson says today he will address the Israeli parliament on June 22nd. Johnson said the ties of the U.S. and Israel run deeper than military partnerships and trade agreements, and he called the address one of the highest honors of his life. Meanwhile, Israel's parliament is set for a key vote to dissolve itself amid a crisis over the military conscription. The move could trigger early elections, which polls suggest Prime Minister Netanyahu would lose. And in more news, Australia, Britain, Canada, New Zealand, and Norway yesterday imposed sanctions on a pair of Israeli cabinet ministers, accusing them of repeatedly inciting violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. Israel called the action outrageous. House leaders held a vigil in Washington, D.C. yesterday for the 2 staff members of the Israeli embassy who were murdered last month. Here's more on the bipartisan tribute.
Republicans and Democrats coming together, remembering the young Jewish couple shot dead last month.
It's a dangerous time to be a Jewish American. The 2 innocent lives we honor today should still be with us. Sarah and Yaron were young, and they were in love. They led honorable lives of advocacy at the Israeli embassy. And they devoted themselves to peace in the land that they so loved.
The two victims, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, were about to be engaged. Police said the suspect yelled, "Free Palestine," after he was arrested.
This is targeted anti-Semitic terrorism. There are no shades of gray, and there is no other way to describe it.
We must come together in good faith as Democrats and Republicans, standing shoulder to shoulder to defeat anti-Semitism whenever and wherever it may be found.
Today we are challenged to act, to honor the fallen not just with words, but with a renewed commitment to fighting the scourge of hate, fighting the demonization and delegitimization of the State of Israel.
Speaker Johnson said Republicans and Democrats stand united in condemning the violence and the rhetoric against Jewish people in the U.S.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents raided a meat production plant in Omaha, Nebraska yesterday. The Homeland Security Department described it as the largest worksite enforcement operation in the state since President Trump took office in January. The raid happened at around 9 a.m. at a Glen Valley Foods plant. The DHS said in a statement on X that, quote, an illegal alien from Honduras threatened federal officers and agents with a box cutter. ICE enforcement officers and agents were conducting an operation at the time. ICE officers and agents are facing a 413% increase in assaults against them. No ICE law enforcement officer was hurt in this operation. The department did not say how many individuals were arrested during the raid. The food packaging company said it was surprised by the raid and had received no notice ahead of time. It added that it had followed the rules regarding immigration status. And a fashion influencer who regularly criticizes the president's wardrobe and the administration's policies admits he's in the U.S. illegally. He wrote a long post on social media explaining his immigration journey. Guy is an editor at fashion blog Put This On and runs a Ralph Lauren fan account on X. He also has posts on his personal X account criticizing the Trump administration's immigration actions. His June 8th post has been seen almost 5 million times on X. In it, Guy explained that his family escaped Vietnam into Canada and crossed the border illegally into the U.S. The Department of Homeland Security responded to Guy's post with an image that seems to indicate it's taking notice. The vice president has also been a target of Guy's fashion criticism and responded to the online discussion with another image that seems to indicate he's in agreement with deporting Guy. Lawmakers in the House last night passed 2 D.C.-related bills. They repeal local laws that address policing and voting. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more on last night's votes.
On a bipartisan basis Tuesday night, House lawmakers passed a bill to restrict non-citizens from voting in Washington, D.C., repealing a 2022 law that was created by the D.C. City Council, allowing non-citizens to vote only in D.C.'s local elections. Although it only applies to local elections, Republicans still say this is unconstitutional and plan to take state-by-state action to stop it. 56 Democrats agreed with Republicans on this bill last evening, though a number of Democrats opposed it, arguing that votes like this would cause voter intimidation, as well as making the point that voting for non-citizens in local elections is not uncommon across the states.
Regardless of your views on the merits of non-citizen voting for local elections, we have to acknowledge that D.C. is not the first, nor are they the only jurisdiction in our country to allow this.
And so just like we fought this in New York City and we prevailed, we will do the same here in Washington, D.C., and make sure that they stop allowing and they don't allow non-citizens to vote in their municipal elections.
Now, this bill already passed the House and the Senate during last Congress, but President Biden vetoed it. This time around, if it does make it through the Senate, it's sure to be signed by President Trump. In addition to this non-citizen voting bill, House lawmakers also voted on a separate bill to address the police force here in Washington, D.C. It would reinstate D.C. police rights to collectively bargain over disciplinary matters and reinstate clear timelines for disciplinary investigations. 30 Democrats joined with Republicans on this piece piece of legislation. Now, this all comes at a time when D.C. officials are urging lawmakers to take action to address their budget shortfall. So back when lawmakers passed a bill to avert a government shutdown in March, it caused D.C. to revert back to 2024 spending levels, leaving them with a $1 billion budget shortfall. The Senate has taken action to address that budget shortfall, and President Trump endorses taking such action, although House Speaker Mike Johnson has not yet brought it up to the floor for a vote, instead saying that his top priority is to get the GOP's big budget bill across the finish line. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
President Trump said yesterday that he would begin phasing out the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and reduce federal disaster aid to states after this year's hurricane season ends. Trump said disaster management is meant to be handled by governors.
We want to wean off of FEMA, and we want to bring it down to the state level. A little bit like education, we're moving it back to the states so the governors can handle it. That's why they're governors now. If they can't handle it, they shouldn't be governor. But these governors can handle it, and they'll work in conjunction with other governors. They'll give each other a hand. But the FEMA thing has not been a very successful experiment.
Trump also said that states would receive less federal aid to respond to natural disasters, and the relief funding will come directly from the president's office. FEMA currently oversees the dissemination of financial aid to the states following the president's declaration of a disaster. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said yesterday that new Centers for Disease Control and Prevention vaccine panel members will be announced in the coming days. He's ordered the removal of all 17 members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. Kennedy said on social media platform X that the new members will not include people who strongly oppose vaccines. He said the new members will be highly credentialed physicians and scientists. They will make important public health decisions using evidence, objectivity, and common sense, he said. Senator Bill Cassidy raised concerns after Kennedy removed the members of the advisory panel. He said on X that he feared the new members would be people who know nothing about vaccines except suspicion. He added, quote, "I've just spoken with Secretary Kennedy and I'll continue to talk with him to ensure this is not the case," close quote. The president of the American Medical Association criticized the decision, saying the removal of all 17 members of that board undermines trust and upends a transparent process that has saved countless lives, in his view. Next, direct talks between the U.S. and Russia are reportedly being moved from Istanbul to Moscow. What Russian representatives are saying about Moscow's shaky relations with Washington. Prospects for a U.S.-Iran nuclear deal could be fading. President Trump says he's losing confidence in Tehran's willingness to limit uranium enrichment. And a rights group says well-known global brands are using minerals sourced from forced labor in Xinjiang in China. We'll have those stories and more after this break.
I had a pretty normal mom life. Everything was pretty good, and it was a very happy life.
And we just had a new baby. And then all of a sudden, within a day or two, she's on life support and fighting for her life.
And I knew something was pretty wrong. A little less than a week after I came home, I couldn't breathe. That's when we decided to go to the hospital. I was given the diagnosis that I had peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is basically a pregnancy-induced heart failure. They told me my only chance was a heart transplant.
And the American Heart Association helped make that possible. Their research helped save me.
This could not happen without monthly donations from friends like you. Your sustained support helps fund life-saving research that leads to medical breakthroughs, like those that gave Jen a second chance at life. Heart disease is the #1 killer in America, and we urgently need your help to save lives. Go to helpheart.org or call now to become a monthly donor today. Your donation of only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, will make a difference through prevention, early detection, treatments, and cures that help save lives.
I am very thankful for the American Heart Association. I'm grateful for just every day that I get with my children.
Please go to helpheart.org or call now with your donation of just $19 a month. Join our community of monthly donors, and you'll get this limited edition t-shirt you could wear to show you're helping save lives.
One simple act today can save your life or the life of a loved one.
Please call or go online to helpheart.org. Become a monthly donor, and for a limited time only, your first month's gift will be matched.
When I arrived in the U.S. at 19, I struggled to find job opportunities without a high school diploma. My name is Ariel, and my entire life changed when I took a chance and I got my high school diploma at age 22. Everything I have, my education, my career, my marriage, I owe to the Adult Literacy Center and my teachers. They were with me every step of the way, helping with my English and math, making sure I pushed through all the challenges. Oh my goodness.
So Ariel, we made this here just for you. It has notes from other people that are here. Your achievement has set an example for so many students. Most importantly, your daughter.
Education was the key that unlocked all my opportunities.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
I'm Stephanie Cox, and this is World Watch. Direct talks between the U.S. and Russia are reportedly being moved from Istanbul to Moscow. That's according to Russia's new ambassador to Washington, who says the next talks will take place in the near future. The U.S. and Russia have been working to improve their ties again. The war in Ukraine triggered the biggest confrontation between Moscow and the West since the Cold War. The Russian ambassador claims that improving ties is being slowed by anti-Russian lawmakers in the U.S. Congress. He added that the recovery of Russian-American relations is still a long way off. A Kremlin spokesman also says that he doesn't expect the next talks to bring quick results. He says that's because there are a lot of blockages in bilateral relations. Ukraine reports bringing home the bodies of more than 1,200 soldiers killed in the war with Russia. Moscow, meanwhile, says Ukraine returned the bodies of 27 Russian soldiers. Kyiv and Moscow reached an agreement at their most recent talks last week. The two sides are scheduled to exchange hundreds of prisoners from various categories, as well as the bodies of soldiers who passed away. If completed, it would be the largest prisoner swap since the start of the war. Today marked the third round of exchanges. Russia says the two sides will begin exchanging seriously wounded prisoners of war tomorrow. Turning to the Middle East, President Trump says he's less confident that Iran will agree to stop uranium enrichment in a nuclear deal. Trump made the comments in a Pod Force One podcast recorded on Monday and released today. The president has been seeking a new nuclear deal to place limits on Iran's nuclear activities. He's threatened Tehran with bombing if no agreement is reached. Trump says the Iranians seem to be using delaying tactics. Trump repeated that the U.S. would not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon, whether or not a deal is reached. Meanwhile, Iran's defense minister said today that if conflict arises with the United States, Iran will strike American bases in the region. Happening at the Korean Peninsula, South Korea's military halted loudspeaker broadcasts aimed at North Korea yesterday. It's reported the broadcasts to the north included news from both sides of the border and have also blasted K-pop tunes. The move fulfills the South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's pledge to restart dialogue, suspend the broadcasts, and restore a military pact with Pyongyang. The Defense Ministry said this aims to rebuild trust and promote peace on the Korean Peninsula. The broadcasts into the north were restarted last July. South Korea's military said then it was in response to North Korea sending trash-filled balloons over the border. And Austrian officials have confirmed that 10 victims were killed in yesterday's school shooting. Police said they found new evidence inside the shooter's home.
We were able to start the investigation immediately after the killing spree. In the meantime, we have also carried out a house search at the home address of the 21-year-old suspect from the district of Graz and the surrounding area, and have been able to establish that there was a suicide note, both in digital form, via video message, and in handwritten form. We were also able to find and secure a pipe bomb, albeit a non-functioning pipe bomb, at his home.
Authorities said the suspected shooter had previously attended the school but did not graduate. Investigators said he used 2 weapons, a shotgun and a pistol, to carry out the killing spree. Authorities added that he took his own life. Officials would not give a motive for the gunman, who they say acted alone. Police believe he obtained the weapons illegally. Officers are still conducting interviews as they investigate the circumstances of the shooting. Austrians paused for a moment of silence today to commemorate the victims killed in yesterday's school shooting. Residents in Graz expressed shock and sorrow as the nation grapples with the tragedy. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on their reactions.
Churches rang funeral bells Wednesday to mark a minute of silence after the worst school shooting in Austria's history. In Graz, locals embraced, attempting to comfort one another. Chiara Kumlinek used to be a student here.
I finished my exams at this school 10 years ago, and I spent my best years of school there. I always felt very protected there. The teachers were also very supportive. I made lifelong friendships there. It just hurts to see that young girls and boys will never come back, that they experienced the worst day of their lives, where I had the best time of my life.
College student Fabian Enzi is trying to comprehend the tragedy.
This school has internships. Students do internships there all the time, and that's a difficult situation. There are a lot of desperate faces. In my family, my father's a teacher, and that shocks you even more.
Clara Arts is struggling with the tragedy as well. She said she couldn't imagine such a shooting taking place in her home country.
I finished my exams last year. Not at this school, but it's simply terrible that this could happen in Austria. I think this shocked everybody a lot, especially the young people, because they still have direct connection of going to school. That this happened at a school, a safe environment, is insanity.
Enia Resnick, a student at the school, said students and teachers needed time to grieve in private.
It's way too early, it's way too traumatizing for most of the students, and we would like to stay, to have our peace and to stay together. And yeah, it's hard to explain how it feels.
Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Several global brands are among dozens of companies at risk of using forced labor through their Chinese supply chains. An international rights group says they use critical minerals sourced from the Xinjiang region of China. A report from Netherlands-based Global Rights Compliance says companies including Avon, Walmart, Nescafé, Coca-Cola, and paint supplier Sherwin-Williams may be linked to titanium sourced from Xinjiang. Rights groups say that that's where the Chinese regime runs forced labor operations using predominantly Muslim Uyghurs and other minorities. The report said commercial paints, thermos cups, and components for the aerospace, auto, and defense industries are among the products sold internationally that can trace their supply chains to minerals from Xinjiang. It said companies must review their supply chains. In 2021, then President Joe Biden signed a law to block imports from Xinjiang unless businesses can prove that the items were made without forced labor. Law enforcement officials announced criminal charges over protests in Los Angeles. Let's tune in.
Handle the unprecedented and unexpected crowds. So we have a good relationship with him, the district attorney's office. They're going to bring their charges. You've got people failing to disperse and some of the lower level stuff. But the more serious stuff, the robberies, the arson, the Molotov cocktails, the assaults, we want to bring those federally because I think our partners understand that there's greater consequences for them in the federal court system than there is in the state court system. Yes.
Based on, you just made a comment about unprecedented times with the information you've gathered. Do you feel what makes this unprecedented in terms of entering the sixth day of protest?
Yeah,
and demonstrators?
Yeah. Well, these organized and orchestrated and it appears to be, we're looking into it, well-funded agitators are coming into town. And they are resisting federal law enforcement operations. Some people apparently have the notion that California really is a sanctuary from federal immigration laws. Let me assure you, there is no sanctuary. Federal laws are applicable here, and they will be enforced. And nothing they have done to date has impacted our ability to carry on our immigration enforcement efforts, and they are continuing as we speak.
Okay. 2 more questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Tom Homan said that the initial raid
I can't speak about the details of the investigation because it is ongoing. That is one of the charges I think that was mentioned that we're looking at, but there are several charges, and that was done under a search warrant. That search that was done there was authorized by a federal court judge based on probable cause of evidence of a crime, and that's what the agents were doing there at that time.
Last question.
If not, we're good. I want to just say, I want to really thank our partners. I want to thank the ATF. The ATF really has a special skill set. This is what they do. They do explosives, they do bombs, they do firearm investigations, and we really thank them for their expertise in helping us file these cases very quickly. And I want to thank our partners at the LA County Sheriff's Office and the LAPD. And like I said, we just posted the videos on our X account, so you can pull them there. Thank you guys very much.
All right, thank you. Press release is out. Copy of the complaint are attached.
Yeah, and that was law enforcement officials announcing criminal charges over protests in Los Angeles. But up ahead, President Trump set to attend his first performance at the Kennedy Center. Big donors will get some special perks. And a sneak peek at a special cake made to celebrate the U.S. Army's 250th birthday. Those stories and more after this break.
As we naturally age, many people are getting zero amount of this incredible and unique substance. That's when we start seeing an impact in our joints, skin, nails, and even our digestion.
People ask me, Dr. X, what is the #1 supplement I should be taking? My answer is multi-collagen protein.
People's reactions to me, people were like, what are you doing? What is going on? You look amazing. You have a glow about you.
What makes Ancient Nutrition Multi-Collagen stand out from other brands? 10 types of collagen. It's grass-fed, pasture-raised with vitamin C and probiotics. It's proven to reduce joint discomfort rapidly, continuously, and persistently. It improves the appearance of crow's feet after 4 weeks and improves skin tone after 8 weeks. And it promotes hair thickness, growth, and a reduction in hair breakage.
It has transformed everything from my hair. Like, my hair was starting to kind of just, come out, and I don't have that anymore. My skin feels amazing.
Call the number on your screen and find out how to get a free bottle when you order, plus free shipping and our 30-day money-back guarantee. And as a bonus, we will include Dr. Josh Axe and Jordan Rubin's revolutionary book, Multi-Collagen Makeover, free with your order, plus free shipping and free returns.
I have implicit trust in Dr. Axe because the plan worked. I'm living proof of it.
This is the collagen protein that is backed by clinical studies. It's what my family uses, it's what I use, and I know you're going to benefit in a big way as well.
Love the results or get your money back. This special TV offer is not available in stores. Call the number on your screen or go online now.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
President Trump will attend Les Miserables tonight, his first show at the Kennedy Center. The performance comes months after the president orchestrated a shakeup of the institution's leadership. Trump pushed out its former chairman, fired its longtime president and pledged to overhaul the center. The Kennedy Center depends on revenue from tickets and subscriptions as well as donations to operate. First Lady Melania Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance will also attend tonight's performance. Trump will sit in the presidential box overlooking center stage in the 2,300-seat theater. Donors who pay $100,000 to $2 million will get to attend a reception before the show and receive a photo with the president. If you're heading to Reagan National Airport this Saturday, you should prepare for possible delays. The Army is marking its 250th birthday with a parade and a flyover in Washington, D.C. The celebration happens to fall on President Trump's birthday. Both vehicle traffic and flights will be affected during the event. The Federal Aviation Administration said it will place temporary flight restrictions around the D.C. area. The parade kicks off at 6:30 p.m. and wraps up with fireworks at 9:45 p.m. The airport's website said that they're adjusting operations to allow for the military flyovers and the fireworks show. United Airlines told CNN they're offering a travel waiver for passengers flying through Reagan Airport. It's also adding 2 extra departures and 2 arrivals at Dulles International Airport as a backup. Delta Airlines is letting travelers change their flights without paying a fare difference. Southwest Airlines expects some delays on its 20 scheduled flights, but no cancellations. They also have a travel waiver in place for affected passengers. The U.S. Army is also celebrating its 250th anniversary with a special cake baked by cake boss Buddy Valastro. And NTD was one of the few news companies invited to the teaser event at the Carlos Bakery Factory. And that's before the grand showing at Times Square on June 14th. NTD's Sean Marshall was there.
I'm here in New Jersey at the Carlos Bake Shop Factory, where they make lots of secret cakes. We went on a tour earlier. We can't show you the secrets, but the cake boss himself was here with the Army. They were baking a cake for the 250th anniversary of the Army on June 14th. One thing that isn't a secret is that the cake boss was happy to sing for the Army representatives and his office crew. That was right after the Army went live on social media to tease the upcoming Army birthday bash in Times Square.
Every highway. Well, for me, it means the world. You know, to me, our military, I have so much respect for and tradition and honor for them. And they've sacrificed so much throughout the years, themselves, their families, and everything else. So for me to give back with a cake is like, I don't want to say an easy thing for me to do, but it's a no-brainer. It's something that we always do. And, you know, we want people to feel like we care about them, especially our troops.
It's been over 10 years since the last time Buddy Valastro, aka the Cake Boss, made a special supersized tank cake to celebrate the Army's birthday in Times Square. But now it's the 250th anniversary of the Army, and the Cake Boss is called back into service once again.
Buddy's been supporting our events for a long time. So when we wanted to do something special for the 250th, when we reached out, Carlos Bake Shop, Buddy, they jumped right in on it, and they've never let us down. And I think this is the first time.
And we never will.
Yeah, this is the first time that we're really doing something special because it's 250th.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Master Sergeant Greg Williams, and we are here live out of the Cake Boss Factory.
The Army would only call on the best to build a cake for them. Buddy Valastro is most widely known for his reality show, Cake Boss, that aired on the TLC channel from 2009 to 2020. Or the many spin-off shows, or his worldwide brand of cakes and food eateries.
We're going to do a real traditional ceremony with lots of good music. I think the surprises are going to come from Buddy.
Yeah, we definitely got a cool cake coming out, and we're going to give cake to everybody. Going to actually have my brother-in-law there to cut the cake because he served in the first Gulf War. So, you know, we're a military family. We understand that true, and we see how much they sacrifice, and anything that we could do to kind of raise awareness and show a thank you, a little sign of gratitude to the men and women who serve for us. It's our pleasure.
One thing we were allowed to mention about their inter-factory workings was their plan to start selling quality frozen pizzas in the next couple months. One of the many items sold in their Carlos Bakery brick-and-mortar establishments. The last cake made for the Army's birthday bash could fit a person inside and shot a cannon of confetti at the audience. So this year's secret cake is sure to be another hit.
214 Times Square, we're here with the K-Pods signing out.
The Army will have different events around New York City on June 14th, which will include family fun experiences at Bryant Park. The public is invited to join the celebration of honoring the past and defending the future.
Did it my way.
Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Stay with us and we'll bring you more news right after this break.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is testifying on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers are questioning him on several topics. This includes a new trade deal that has been reached between the U.S. and China. Tech billionaire Elon Musk said he regrets recent posts about President Trump, saying they went too far. So, where does their relationship stand now? Protests erupt in multiple cities across the country. What Texas is doing to stay ahead of the game, and a federal judge refusing to immediately grant a request by California Governor Gavin Newsom as state and federal officials butt heads. A federal appeals court in New York heard arguments today in President Trump's bid to erase his criminal conviction.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, June 11th. I'm Stephania Cox. The U.S. and China have struck a trade deal during talks in London. President Trump confirmed today that the deal with China is done. He said on Truth Social that Beijing will supply magnets and rare earth minerals to the U.S. In return, the U.S. will allow Chinese students to attend American colleges and universities. He added, quote, "We're getting a total of 55% tariffs. China's getting 10%. Trump said the deal is subject to final approval by him and China's communist leader, Xi Jinping. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick spoke early this morning after 2 days of intense negotiations.
So the idea is we're going to go back and speak to President Trump and make sure he approves it. They're going to go back and speak to President Xi and make sure he approves it. And if that is approved, we will then implement the framework that we have worked hard over these last 2 days.
Lutnick said the new agreement put meat on the bones of the Geneva deal that had faltered over China's curbs on the export of critical rare earth minerals. Now Lutnick says those restrictions will be removed as a fundamental part of the new framework. He said that some recent US export restrictions would also be lifted. Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Li Chenggang also spoke to reporters. He confirmed that agreement had been reached and said both sides would now report back to national leaders. Markets gave the news a cautious welcome, with Asian stocks posting modest gains in Wednesday trade.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testified before the House Ways and Means Committee today. Bessent urged China to keep its promises from a recent trade deal made in Geneva. This came just hours after both sides agreed on a new plan to carry out the agreement.
Dozens of countries have engaged the administration thus far with offers to improve their trade relations with the United States. This includes China. I have just returned in the middle of last night from successful negotiations in London with a Chinese delegation that will not only stabilize the economic relationship between our two economies, but make it more balanced. China has a singular opportunity to stabilize its economy by shifting away from excess production towards greater consumption. But the country needs to be a reliable partner in trade negotiations. If China will course correct by upholding its end of the initial trade agreement we outlined in Geneva, and I believe after our talks in London they will, then the rebalancing of the world's two largest economies is possible.
Bessent said China has a singular opportunity to stabilize its economy by shifting away from excess manufacturing production for export to greater domestic production. Bessent's testimony did not share details about the deal made with China after 2 days of talks in London. He left the talks early to return to Washington for the House hearing. And a victory for the Trump administration's tariffs plan, at least for now. A federal appeals court ruled yesterday the government can keep many of its tariffs on China and other countries while legal challenges play out. The appeals court said the case raised issues of exceptional importance. The court is therefore taking the rare step of having the 11-member court hear the appeal instead of it going before a 3-judge panel first. It scheduled arguments for late July. The Court of International Trade ruled last month the president exceeded his authority to impose tariffs after he claimed a national emergency. The Trump administration appealed, leading to yesterday's ruling. Inflation rose slightly last month as the cost of groceries ticked higher. This suggests that price increases may return as global tariffs affect the economy. A Labor Department report released today said that consumer prices increased 2.4% in May compared with a year ago. That's up from a 2.3% yearly increase in April. Grocery prices rose 0.3% from April to May. They've gone up 2.2% in the past year. Fruits and vegetables, breakfast cereals, and frozen foods all rose in price. Egg costs fell 2.7%. It's their second straight drop, though they are still more than 40% more expensive than a year ago. President Trump said today, and he repeated his view that the Federal Reserve should cut interest rates by 1 percentage point. He said the latest inflation figures were great. An appeals court today heard arguments over whether President Trump's New York criminal conviction should be moved to federal court. Trump was convicted in July on 34 counts of falsifying business records. The president's attorney tried for the third time to convince a court to transfer the state criminal case to a federal court. They first requested the transfer in 2023 before the trial began and again after the conviction, but the state court rejected both requests. Trump wants the federal appeals court to take control of the criminal case and then ultimately decide his appeal of the verdict. His attorney again argued that the case should have been tried in a federal court because some of the evidence presented in the state court case involved conduct while Trump was in his first term of office. They asked the appellate panel to once and for all decide whether prosecutions of former or current presidents should be in federal courts. The New York prosecutor wants the case to remain in state court. Elon Musk steps back from his recent feud with President Trump. He said on X that he regrets some of his posts about Trump. Musk wrote on his social media platform X, quote, "I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week. They went too far." He did not say which specific posts he was talking about, though he has deleted several that were critical of Trump. One of those signaled support for impeaching the president. Musk's relationship with Trump deteriorated in public fashion last week as the two men traded jibes on social media. Musk slammed Trump's tax and domestic policy bill, labeling it a disgusting abomination. In a phone conversation with New York Post, Trump commented on Musk's apology. He said, quote, "I thought it was very nice that he did that." And the curfew imposed on downtown Los Angeles was lifted this morning as protests entered their 6th day. This followed overnight chaos after demonstrators defied the curfew following looting and violence. Meanwhile, a federal judge has rejected Governor Gavin Newsom's request to immediately block federal troops from the city. Here's more.
The federal judge did not immediately rule on the California governor's request to block the Trump administration from deploying federal troops in Los Angeles. Governor Gavin Newsom's request argues Trump's mobilization of the National Guard is unlawful, as the section it invoked can only be used in cases of rebellion or situations where regular forces are unable to enforce the law. Newsom argued what's happening in LA doesn't qualify as a rebellion, that the federal government bypassed the governor. He also argued it might be in violation of a law barring active duty military personnel and federalized National Guard from civilian law enforcement known as the Posse Comitatus Act. However, U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer has given the Trump administration more time to respond until 11 a.m. Wednesday. He also granted Newsom an additional day to respond to the administration's response. Meanwhile, LA Mayor Karen Bass has announced a curfew in the city's downtown areas. Bass said Tuesday 23 businesses across downtown LA had been locked Monday night.
So my message to you is, if you do not live or work in downtown LA, avoid the area. Law enforcement will arrest individuals who break the curfew, and you will be prosecuted.
The curfew went into effect at 8 p.m. Tuesday and lasted until 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. Bass said she expected the curfew to last for several days. However, protests continued through the night with groups violating the order. The LAPD said on social media it was carrying out mass arrests. But Bass also said what's happening downtown is not affecting the rest of the city.
I think it is important to point this out, not to minimize the vandalism and violence that has taken place there. It has been significant, but it is extremely important to know that what is happening in this 1 square mile is not affecting the city.
Meanwhile, LA's Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hatami said Tuesday on Newsmax the situation demands cooperation between local and federal agents. His comments came after clashes between protesters and law enforcement over the weekend.
So here's the thing. If we can't protect law enforcement, even federal law enforcement, and if we can't detain individuals who are here illegally who have committed violent crimes, well, then you're going to need other departments and organizations to help.
He argued LA's sanctuary city status makes it impossible for the kind of cooperation required. He also delivered a message to protesters saying anyone caught engaging in violence and criminal activity will be hit with the full force of the law.
Here's the thing. Looting is a crime, and you're going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for that. Committing arson is a crime. Assaulting the police is a crime. Launching fireworks at them, launching fireworks at horses, throwing Molotov cocktails at them, lighting cars on fire, ramming your motorcycle or car into police officers, throwing rocks at police cars, regular cars, or police officers. All those are crimes.
President Trump, meanwhile, has also weighed in, vowing to keep the military inside LA until there's peace on the streets.
If there's peace, we get out. If there's even a chance of no peace, we stay there until there's peace.
As all of this unfolds, the FBI says it's investigating who might be funding the protests. FBI Director Kash Patel told Just the News, quote, "The FBI is investigating any and all monetary connections responsible for these riots."
And videos circulating online show multiple stores in downtown LA being looted Monday night, with windows smashed at the Apple and Adidas stores and merchandise stolen. Attorney General Pam Bondi addressed the issue this morning.
Well, sure. Right now, it's keeping California safe. If Gavin Newsom isn't going to keep California safe, we are. You know, they imposed a curfew last night. I think that helped a bit. But today, we wanted them to declare, they didn't declare an economic disaster out there with all of the businesses. Had they done that, Kelly Loeffler and the Small Business Association could have come in and helped, given federal aid to all of these businesses in California. We've been seeing on the news all of these drugstores getting robbed, getting looted. The Apple store just got raided. I mean, we're all watching this live on the news. And this isn't just looting to me. You think people just run in, take something, leave, and nothing happens? We're using the Hobbs Act. We are charging robbery to protect Californians under this. If you loot a store, we are going to charge you with robbery under the Hobbs Act, and you're looking at maximum 20 years in prison. But we're going to prosecute you for that. Right now in California, what we're doing is working. By bringing in the National Guard, by bringing in the Marines right now to back them up, to protect our federal buildings, to protect the highways, to protect the citizens. So right now in California, we're at a good point. We're not scared to go further. We're not frightened to do something else if we need to.
Meanwhile, Vivek Ramaswamy and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis criticized California as being unsafe and mismanaged. Governor Gavin Newsom said yesterday that state and local law enforcement were mostly successful in maintaining order despite a few incidents. He added that California is no stranger to episodes of civil unrest. Here's Newsom.
If you incite violence or destroy our communities, you're going to be held to account. That kind of criminal behavior will not be tolerated, full stop. Already more than 220 people have been arrested, and we're reviewing tapes to build additional cases, and people will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt is now addressing the media. Let's tune into the press briefing.
Threw rocks at police cars and officers, burned vehicles, shut down freeways, and lobbed Molotov cocktails, all because the Trump administration was removing violent criminal illegal aliens from the city. These attacks were aimed not just at law enforcement, but at American culture and society itself. Rioters burned American flags, chanted "Death to ICE," and spray-painted anti-American slogans on buildings. But President Trump will never allow mob rule to prevail in America. The most basic duty of government is to preserve law and order, and this administration embraces that sacred responsibility. Democrats like Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass shamefully failed to meet their sworn obligations to their citizens. They didn't have the courage to do the right thing and protect law-abiding Californians from rioters. That's why President Trump deployed the National Guard and mobilized Marines to end the chaos and restore law and order. The mob violence is being stomped out. The criminals responsible will be swiftly brought to justice, and the Trump administration's operations to arrest illegal aliens are continuing unabated. When the initial immigration enforcement actions took place on June 6th, Mayor Bass took to social media to say she was deeply angered by what has taken place. Mayor Bass then embarked on one of the most outrageous campaign of lies this country has ever seen from an elected official, blaming President Trump and brave law enforcement officers for the violence. She accused heroic American immigration and customs enforcement officers targeting illegal alien murderers, rapists, and pedophiles of, quote, sowing terror in communities and disrupting basic principles of safety in our city. Around the same time, Governor Newsom claimed that immigration enforcement actions were causing chaos. That's how radical Democrats have become. Their opposition to President Trump has forced them to side with illegal alien criminals in their communities and violent rioters and looters over law enforcement officers who are just doing their jobs. Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom fanned the flames and demonized our brave ICE officers. Instead of defending their city and their state, Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom claimed that in order for the riots and the violence to stop, ICE needed to leave and immigration raids must end. In other words, the position of the Democrat Party is that the federal government is not allowed to enforce our laws and to arrest and deport illegal alien criminals. They're attempting to use a violent mob as a weapon against their own constituents to prevent the enforcement of immigration law. This is deeply un-American and morally reprehensible. President Trump received a clear mandate from voters to reverse the illegal invasion ushered in by Joe Biden's open border and to end the lawlessness represented by Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom's California. President Trump promised to carry out the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and left-wing riots will not deter him in that effort. Sanctuary cities and states will no longer be allowed to shield illegal criminals from deportation. Just take a look at some of the illegal monsters who were taken off the streets in Los Angeles in recent days. A Vietnamese national, a known gang member with a conviction for second-degree murder. A Mexican national with convictions for child molestation who was armed with a dangerous weapon and had previous arrests for robbery and domestic violence. A Filipino national with convictions of rape, assault, burglary, and theft. A Mexican national convicted of statutory rape, narcotics violations, and hit and run. A Nicaraguan national with convictions for domestic violence and hit and run, and a previous arrest for willful cruelty to a child. And an illegal alien from Mexico who was arrested after allegedly throwing a Molotov cocktail at law enforcement officers during the Paramount riots on Saturday. He is now being charged with attempted murder. Law-abiding American citizens do not want these public safety threats living in their communities, no matter what Democrats like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom may claim. And let this be an unequivocal message to left-wing radicals in other parts of the country who are thinking about copycatting the violence in an effort to stop this administration's mass deportation efforts. You will not succeed. Any lawlessness will only strengthen this president's resolve to defend the majority of Americans who want to live their lives peacefully, free from the fear of violent criminal illegal aliens. As President Trump said, Order will be maintained, and illegal aliens will be expelled from our country. In economic news, the latest Consumer Price Index inflation report came in today below expectations again. Since President Trump took office, inflation has come in below economics expectations every single month. Core inflation held steady and remains at the lowest level since March of 2021. Wage growth remains strong. The average private sector worker is on track to see their real earnings increase by around $1,200 adjusted for inflation. And prices continue to fall for everyday Americans. Energy prices fell from April to May. Gasoline has fallen each month since President Trump took office, down 12% over the past year. And prices for meat, poultry, eggs, and fish are all down from April to May as well. Under President Trump's strong leadership, America is beating Joe Biden's record-high inflation crisis. And once the One Big Beautiful Bill passes, our economy will boom like never before. This bill is the largest tax cut for middle-class Americans in history. The One Big Beautiful Bill gives a 15% tax cut to working Americans and families will see increased take-home pay of $10,000 per year. The One Big Beautiful Bill expands the child tax credit to $2,500 for more than 40 million American families with children. And the One Big Beautiful Bill cuts taxes for overtime workers, saving them nearly $2,000 per year, and ends taxes on tips, saving tipped workers nearly $2,000 per year as well. All of these provisions are broadly popular with an overwhelming support from the American people. We need Republicans in Congress to finish the job and send the One Big Beautiful Bill back to President Trump's desk for his signature as soon as possible. With that, we'll get to questions. I'm sure you have many of them today. Here in our new media seat is Elizabeth Mitchell, the White House correspondent for the Daily Signal, who's not afforded a seat in this room, but today she is. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Karoline. I have two questions, if that's okay. First, a few Republicans on Capitol Hill are suggesting that President Trump scale back deportations, even as ICE is reportedly gearing up for raids in 5 more Democrat-led areas. Would anything dissuade President Trump, and would he consider sending in Marines if anti-ICE violence occurs in these cities?
Well, I think I may have just answered both of your questions with my opening monologue. The Trump administration is going to continue the mass deportation effort that the president promised the American public. Many of you were at those rallies in cities and communities across the country when the president spoke about his commitment to removing violent illegal criminals and anyone who has broken our nation's immigration laws from American communities. And God bless our ICE and Border Patrol who are working hard on that effort. This administration is going to continue that. And it's part of the reason we do need the One Big Beautiful Bill to pass as well, may I add, because the bill provides funding to hire more ICE agents and Border Patrol agents, more personnel on the ground to conduct this important public safety work.
Thank you. And on another topic, President Trump has indicated that aides to former President Biden who used the auto pen to sign major orders and pardons should be investigated for potential crimes. Does he think that Biden allowing or at least being negligently unaware of this activity was an impeachable offense?
I haven't heard the president address whether it's an impeachable offense, but it could perhaps be a criminal offense, especially on behalf of staffers who may have been utilizing the president's signature without his authority or consent. I understand that Republicans on the Hill are moving in the right direction to call attention to this and to bring in some former White House staffers who clearly knew more than they ever shared and never addressed with the American public. And so we look forward to seeing where this investigation continues. And I know the Department of Justice is also looking into the matter as well. Alex, good to see you today.
Good to see you, Caroline. Thank you. You mentioned foreign flags being blown during these protests. There are protest activities being organized for this weekend. Part of it are Democrats saying they want to reclaim the American flag. It's also being titled No King's Day. Does the president see himself as a king? And does the White House expect to see American flags being flown during these protests this weekend?
The president views himself as the president of the United States of America. This is a constitutional republic, and we want to see all of our citizens be proud of the country in which they are given the privilege and the blessing to live. And I think that those images of foreign flags being waved by illegal criminals and by violent rioters in the face of cars blowing up and of flames in the city. I have photos of that here to show you. With this violence and destruction that occurred is an image that Governor Gavin Newsom owns. This is his city, and President Trump saw these images, and he said that is not going to be accepted or tolerated, and hence why he deployed the National Guard and United States Marines who have helped to quell that violence.
If I can ask another.
Sure.
If the president does end up deploying any National Guard members, perhaps Marines, to blue states, would he be in contact with the governors prior to this? Would it be necessary?
Well, President Trump was in contact with Governor Gavin Newsom, despite some of the claims he's made in the last couple of days. The president called the governor on Friday evening and told him to let law enforcement in California do their jobs. And the Los Angeles Police Department, by the way, are fantastic people. They are trying to do the work that they've so bravely signed up to do, to enforce the law. But they have been kneecapped by incompetent Democrat policies and Democrat politicians who do not allow their local law enforcement to correspond and coordinate with federal immigration authorities. And so the president gave Gavin Newsom a warning and said, get it together. 24 hours later, we saw more images like this. We heard about Border Patrol agents who were being the target of rocks. These illegal criminals were throwing rocks at our Border Patrol and ICE agents, and so the president made the decision to federalize California's National Guard. Stephanie.
Thank you. Two questions on the China trade deal, if I may.
Sure.
First, will the president formally sign the trade deal, and if so, when? Secretary Lutnick sort of alluded to the fact that it might be in a couple of days, but I'm curious if there's anything more specific to read out.
Sure. Well, I do have more specifics for you. I spoke to the president about this. He spoke to his trade team, who did a fantastic job negotiating this on behalf of the United States and meeting with their Chinese counterparts. The president is talking to them about the details of it now. But what the president heard, he liked. China has agreed to open their markets to the United States separately of this deal. And when it comes to this deal, we're going back to the terms that were agreed upon in Geneva for the release of some of those critical minerals and the magnets from China to the United States. And we have agreed to fully comply with the Geneva Agreement as well. So the president is reviewing the details of that with his trade team now, and you'll hear more from him, I'm sure.
And then the second question, on tariffs, Secretary Lutnick suggested that the tariffs would remain unchanged with China. I'm wondering if there's any room for them to negotiate even lower, or if this is the floor.
I won't get ahead of any further negotiations. We're in a great place right now, and I would add that this is the result of a lot of hard work from the president and his team, and the president has a good and respectful relationship with President Xi, and as you know, they had a direct conversation which led to this success that the president announced on Truth Social this morning. JJ.
On North Korea, has the president tried to resume dialogue with Kim Jong-un? There's some reporting that the president sent a letter and tried to give it to Kim Jong-un through some North Korean diplomats through the UN, and they declined to take it and send it to Kim Jong-un?
The president remains receptive to correspondence with Kim Jong-un, and he'd like to see the progress that was made at that summit in Singapore, which I know you covered in 2018 during his first term. As for specific correspondence, I'll leave that to the president to answer. Sure.
Good afternoon. Yeah, thanks. Back to the trade deal negotiations with China. Jimmy Lai, as you know, is a pro-democracy advocate, Catholic, sitting in solitary confinement in Hong Kong as we speak. His family believes he may be close to death. Did his name come up, Jimmy Lai's name come up in these negotiations with China?
Not to my knowledge. I understand the negotiations were very much focused on our trade and economic relationship with China.
Does the president believe he can free Jimmy Lai from prison?
I'll check with the president. It's certainly an important issue, and I'll get back to you.
Thanks, Karoline. The president said yesterday that paid insurrectionists were behind or were involved in the protest in Los Angeles. Does the White House have any more details about who they believe is paying these protesters?
The president spoke about this last night when he returned from Fort Bragg, because frankly the president has a lot of common sense. And if you look at some of the imagery that we have received from the Department of Homeland Security and ICE and law enforcement who are on the ground, you will see boxes and boxes of very professionalized masks and rioting equipment being dropped off for these protesters. So it's a good question the president is raising, and one we are looking into, about who is funding these insurrectionists and these rioters and these protesters and these illegal criminals. And I have updates for you on the numbers, by the way. Since June 6th, there have been 330 illegal aliens that have been arrested as part of these riots in Los Angeles. 113 of those illegal aliens had prior criminal convictions. And overall, and this includes arrests of American citizens, there's been 157 people arrested for assault and obstruction-related charges, including the attempted murder of a police officer with a Molotov cocktail. So who is funding these illegal aliens who are coming in with this very professional riot gear? It's a question everyone in this room who cares about truth should be asking. And we encourage your help in trying to get to the bottom of that question. Indeed.
Thank you, Caroline. About Elon Musk, he issued an apology this morning. Has the president accepted the apology, or does he think it's too little too late?
The president acknowledged the statement that Elon put out this morning, and he is appreciative of it, and we are continuing to focus on the business of the American people.
And has the administration started a review of Musk's government contracts, something that the president said he's considering?
What do you mean by that?
Has the administration started a review of the contracts that Musk and his companies currently have?
No efforts have been made on that front as far as I'm aware.
And just one more, if I may, on just everything sort of we've seen so far with the president's response to the LA protests. There is criticism that seems to suggest that the president responded the way he did because it was a deliberate, calculated attempt to sort of shift focus away from his feud with Musk. How would you respond to that?
The president responded to the LA riots, condemning the violence
from Musk.
That's an incredibly disingenuous attack. The president saw images of Border Patrol and ICE agents being hailed with rocks and Molotov cocktails. He saw vehicles being burned to the ground with illegal aliens flying foreign flags, and that's what prompted the president to have this response that has clearly worked, because last night in Los Angeles, you didn't see many of those images. And I would add the governor and the mayor need to actually do more. I know Gavin Newsom had a big address to the nation last night. I guess he thought that's what it was for maybe his future political ambitions, but he spoke a lot of words. We haven't seen action. California has been a mess for years because of the incompetence of Gavin Newsom, so the president was responding to that only. Caitlin.
Caroline, two questions for you.
Sure.
Over the weekend, Secretary Noem sent a memo to the Pentagon asking Secretary Hegseth to have and direct the military that's on the ground in LA to arrest and detain what she said were lawbreakers. Is the president okay with that? And under what authority would the members of the military be able to arrest people inside the United States?
I can't speak for a letter that came from the Department of Homeland Security. I can't speak for the president and what's currently happening on the ground now. And as you know, the president federalized the National Guard under U.S. Code 10, which he has the authority to do. And our United States Marines and the National Guardsmen and women who are on the ground right now are helping to create a peaceful environment for ICE and Border Patrol, who were being, again, hailed with rocks, who were being violently and viciously attacked. They needed reinforcements, and so our United States Marines who are on the ground are providing those reinforcements to ensure the environment is peaceful so that these raids and deportations can continue.
But he realizes they can't actually arrest people unless he invokes the Insurrection Act, which, I mean, seemingly was not something that was in Secretary Noem's memo, a clear distinction she did not make there.
Again, you're trying to conflate a letter that was sent to the Department of Homeland Security to the president's legal authority. The president understands the legal authority that he invoked, and that's the current situation right now.
When it comes to federalizing the National Guard, what is the specific criteria that the president is using for when he's deciding to do that, and in which states?
The president was asked and answered this yesterday. He wants to see an end to the chaos and the violence. He doesn't want to see law enforcement officers being attacked. He wants to see peace. He wants law-abiding Californians to be able to bring their kids to school, to be able to go to work without seeing this violence in the streets. That's what the president's hoping for, and that's why he's taken this action. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. Two questions on two separate topics. One has to do with the military parade taking place here in Washington this weekend. There's a lot of security around the White House complex, around the Capitol complex, even along the tidal basin. Is that just proactive? Are you expecting anything in particular in terms of unrest like we've seen in Los Angeles?
These are proactive security measures to protect those marching in the parade, many of whom will be veterans and our brave men and women in uniform and Gold Star families. There's going to be military families from around the country who are flying into this parade. And of course, it's to protect the spectators who will be enjoying this incredibly patriotic show on Saturday. And I hope you all join us there.
And then secondly, Secretary Pete Hegseth testified on the Senate side of the Capitol today.
Yes.
And he was asked about America's, the administration's view of Vladimir Putin's intentions. And specifically, it was asked whether or not his intentions go beyond, his territorial ambitions go beyond Ukraine. When that question was posed to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane replied that he does believe that his territorial ambitions go beyond Ukraine, but Secretary Hegseth says it's not clear at this point. How does the president view this issue?
president has spoken on this. He said, as he calls it, he believes Ukraine was always the apple of Putin's eye. And he made it very clear to Putin in his first term not to invade Ukraine. Putin didn't invade Ukraine because of President Trump's peace through strength foreign policy agenda and the effective deterrence policies that he implemented in the first term. Unfortunately, because of the weakness and incompetence of the previous administration, Vladimir Putin made the decision to invade Ukraine. And now we have this brutal war, which the president is working very hard to end. Jasmine.
Thanks so much, Karoline. The president warned that any protests on Saturday would be met with force. Can you clarify what kind of protest President Trump does support or find acceptable?
The president absolutely supports peaceful protests. He supports the First Amendment. He supports the right of Americans to make their voices heard. He does not support violence of any kind. He does not support assaulting law enforcement officers who are simply trying to do their job. It's very clear for the president what he supports and what he does not. Unfortunately for Democrats, that line has not been made clear, and they've allowed this unrest and this violence to continue, and the president has had to step in.
One question. So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the military parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question. Raquel.
Thank you so much, Karoline.
Raquel, and then I can go to you, Francis. Go.
Thank you so much, Karoline. I have two questions. One about Israel. Yesterday, the U.S. ambassador to Israel said the U.S. no longer is pursuing the goal of an independent Palestinian state. Can you confirm that the president is no longer supporting a two-state solution? And is President Trump considering diplomatic action against countries who takes action against Israel during next week's UN conference?
Right now, the president views the situation in Israel and Gaza as deeply unfortunate and needing to end. And the president is realistic about the current state of affairs in this region of the world. And that's why the president has said the number one focus and priority of the administration is to release all of the hostages from Gaza and to end this conflict as soon as possible. The administration is still pushing very hard for the release of all the hostages. And as for what happens next, clearly Gaza is an uninhabitable place. It needs to be rebuilt with the help of our Arab partners, and the president wants to see that happen as well. Take a couple
more. One on the G7 engagement. President Trump is traveling there on Sunday. Other presidents beyond the G7 leaders are also going. President Lula from Brazil, President Sheinbaum from Mexico, and President Zelensky from Ukraine are also going. Do you have confirmation if President Trump is meeting any other leaders on the sideline of the G7?
Yes.
To know about the Lula engagement.
I can confirm there will be quite a few bilateral meetings between the president and other foreign leaders. The White House is still working very hard to finalize that schedule, and we will provide that for you as soon as we have it. Great.
Thanks, Karoline. Just back to the China trade deal, can you talk about the status of the export controls that the U.S. imposed? Are those no longer being imposed?
We are fully complying with the Geneva Agreement. Go ahead. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. One foreign question for you and one domestic. The foreign, the president, of course, has said he would lift sanctions on Syria. Is there an executive order coming along soon to go do that? And is the president planning to try to get involved in any kind of a peace agreement between Israel and Syria that would disengage those two?
To the best of my knowledge, the Treasury Department took action after the president made that announcement in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. And then on the domestic side, you were just asked about the First Amendment rights issues. In the president's comments yesterday, though, he just said protesters would be strongly dealt with. In your list before, you referred to insurrectionists, rioters, and protesters together. Obviously, they're quite different from your earlier answer. I'm struck by the fact that the president has not at any point said the most important thing here is to protect the First Amendment rights of peaceful protesters. So I'm wondering, where in his hierarchy of interests does he place that? Is the First Amendment protection the most important? Is stopping violence most important? Why is he not out saying all peaceful protesters will be protected?
I think two things can be important at the same time. And the president, as I just answered, supports the right of Americans to peacefully protest. He supports the First Amendment. But that is not the majority of the behavior that we have seen taking place in Los Angeles. We have seen mobs of violent rioters and agitators assaulting law enforcement officers, assaulting our federal immigration authorities. And we have seen, as I said, this goes back to what this administration is trying to do and accomplish, and that's enforcing law and order in our nation's communities. And it's removing public safety threats from communities in Los Angeles.
You're saying the majority have not been peaceful, the majority have been violent.
I just read for you the arrest numbers. We've arrested nearly 400 illegal aliens alone, just illegal aliens who have been arrested in these riots since June 6th, since they began.
Thousands of people on the streets.
Yeah, and we've had hundreds of people who have assaulted law enforcement officers. Are you saying that that's that's appropriate behavior?
No,
Are you
no,
saying
I'm not
that
saying
the
that at all.
president
I'm
shouldn't
just
take
trying to
action?
figure out-
The Democrat governor and the Democrat mayor of Los Angeles have failed their citizens. And the majority of Americans, the majority of Californians do not want to see law enforcement officers being assaulted in the streets. And thankfully, the president took action and stepped in to protect our federal law enforcement agents, to protect federal buildings, to protect the federal mission of deporting illegal criminals off of our streets. And that mission will continue every day as far as we're concerned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Karoline.
Imagine a coffee that cares for your health. Expertly fermented with a 50 enzyme complex to enhance flavor and remove bitterness. Small batch roasted to a decadent medium dark, resulting in a brew that is gentle on digestion, low acid, and up to 90% less caffeine than regular coffee. Try America's first enzyme fermented coffee today.
I'm Ilka. I live with my daughter and with my grandchildren. There's a sense of comfort that comes with eating a good meal. We try to make the most, of what we have. We have rent to pay, and then there are lights and there are gas. And while my daughter and I both work, it still just doesn't seem like there's enough to go around sometimes.
Every day, millions of our neighbors face hunger, including 1 in 5 children, and food costs keep rising. Please call or go online right now to join Feeding America with your gift of just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day. Your monthly support can fill plates with nutritious food for families across the country and in your community, thanks to a nationwide network of food banks and volunteers.
If you were over and playing with us, you were part of our family and you were going to eat. A real cook can take nothing and make something.
No one should ever have to wonder if they will have enough to eat, and our neighbors are working hard to feed their families every day. Call or go online now. Visit helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month. 98% of donations go directly to help millions of people facing hunger from coast to coast and in your own community. Use your credit card and you'll get this exclusive canvas grocery bag as a thank you for joining hands with people across America to help end hunger.
Some of the lessons that I hope that my family will take, it is important to treat people the way that you want to be treated. I have carried on the tradition of loving people through food.
Please call right now or go online to make a monthly gift at helpfeedingamerica.org. Your support helps our neighbors bring food home to their families.
Adopting you was the best decision in our life. And I am so proud to call you my son.
Inflation rose slightly last month as the cost of groceries ticked higher. This suggests that price increases may return as global tariffs affect the economy. A Labor Department report released today said that consumer prices increased 2.4% in May compared with a year ago. That's up from a 2.3% yearly increase in April. Grocery prices rose 0.3% from April to May. They've gone up 2.2% in the past year. Fruits and vegetables, breakfast cereals, and frozen foods all rose in price. Egg costs fell 2.7%. It's their second straight drop, though they're still more than 40% more expensive than a year ago. President Trump said today, repeated his view that the Federal Reserve should cut interest rates by 1 percentage point. He said the latest inflation figures were great. And an appeals court today heard arguments over whether President Trump's New York criminal conviction should be moved to federal court. Trump was convicted in July on 34 counts of falsifying business records. The president's attorney tried for the third time to convince a court to transfer the state criminal case to a federal court. They first requested the transfer in 2023 before the trial began, and again after the conviction, but the state court rejected both requests. Trump wants the federal appeals court to take control of the criminal case and then ultimately decide his appeal of the verdict. His attorney again argued that the case should have been tried in a federal court because some of the evidence presented in the state court case involved conduct while Trump was in his first term of office. They asked the appellate panel to once and for all decide whether prosecutions of former or current presidents should be in federal courts. The New York prosecutor wants the case to remain in state court. The U.S. and China have struck a deal on trade at talks in London. President Trump confirmed today that the deal with China is done. He said on Truth Social that Beijing will supply magnets and rare earth minerals to the U.S. In return, the U.S. will allow Chinese students to attend American colleges and universities. He added, quote, "We are getting a total of 55% tariffs. China is getting 10%. Trump said the deal is subject to final approval by himself and China's communist leader, Xi Jinping. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick spoke early this morning after 2 days of intense negotiations.
So the idea is we're going to go back and speak to President Trump and make sure he approves it. They're going to go back and speak to President Xi and make sure he approves it. And if that is approved, we will then implement the framework that we have worked hard over these last 2 days.
Lutnick said the new agreement put meat on the bones of the Geneva deal that had faltered over China's curbs on the export of critical rare earth minerals. Now Lutnick says those restrictions will be removed as a fundamental part of the new framework. He said that some recent US export restrictions would also be lifted. Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Li Chenggang also spoke to reporters. He confirmed that agreement had been reached and said both sides would now report back to national leaders. Markets gave the news a cautious welcome, with Asian stocks posting modest gains in Wednesday trade.
Victory for the Trump administration's tariffs plan, at least for now. A federal appeals court ruled yesterday the government can keep many of its tariffs on China and other countries while legal challenges play out. The appeals court said the case raised issues of exceptional importance. The court is therefore taking the rare step of having the 11-member court hear the appeal instead of it going before a 3-judge panel first. It scheduled arguments for late July. The Court of International Trade ruled last month the president exceeded his authority to impose tariffs after he claimed a national emergency. The Trump administration appealed, leading to yesterday's ruling. And the curfew imposed on downtown Los Angeles was lifted this morning as protests enter their 6th day. This followed overnight chaos after demonstrators defied the curfew following looting and violence. Meanwhile, a federal judge has rejected Governor Gavin Newsom's request to immediately block federal troops from the city. Here's more.
A federal judge did not immediately rule on the California governor's request to block the Trump administration from deploying federal troops in Los Angeles. Governor Gavin Newsom's request argues Trump's mobilization of the National Guard is unlawful, as the section it invoked can only be used in cases of rebellion or situations where regular forces are unable to enforce the law. Newsom argued what's happening in LA doesn't qualify as a rebellion, that the federal government bypassed the governor. He also argued it might be in violation of a law barring active duty military personnel and federalized National Guard from civilian law enforcement known as the Posse Comitatus Act. However, U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer has given the Trump administration more time to respond until 11 a.m. Wednesday. He also granted Newsom an additional day to respond to the administration's response. Meanwhile, LA Mayor Karen Bass has announced a curfew in the city's downtown areas. Bass said Tuesday 23 businesses across downtown LA had been locked Monday night.
So my message to you is, if you do not live or work in downtown LA, avoid the area. Law enforcement will arrest individuals who break the curfew, and you will be prosecuted.
The curfew went into effect at 8 p.m. Tuesday and lasted until 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. Bass said she expected the curfew to last for several days. However, protests continued through the night, with groups violating the order. The LAPD said on social media it was carrying out mass arrests. But Bass also said what's happening downtown is not affecting the rest of the city.
I think it is important to point this out, not to minimize the vandalism and violence that has taken place there. It has been significant, but it is extremely important to know that what is happening in this 1 square mile is not affecting the city.
Meanwhile, LA's Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hatami said Tuesday on Newsmax the situation demands cooperation between local and federal agents. His comments came after clashes between protesters and law enforcement over the weekend.
So here's the thing. If we can't protect law enforcement, even federal law enforcement, and if we can't detain individuals who are here illegally, who have committed violent crimes, well, then you're going to need other departments and organizations to help.
He argued LA's sanctuary city status makes it impossible for the kind of cooperation required. He also delivered a message to protesters saying anyone caught engaging in violence and criminal activity will be hit with the full force of the law.
Here's the thing. Looting is a crime, and you're going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for that. Committing arson is a crime. Assaulting the police is a crime. Launching fireworks at them, launching fireworks at horses, throwing Molotov cocktails at them, lighting cars on fire, ramming your motorcycle or car into police officers, throwing rocks at police cars, regular cars, or police officers. All those are crimes.
President Trump, meanwhile, has also weighed in, vowing to keep the military inside LA until there's peace on the streets.
If there's peace, we get out. If there's even a chance of no peace, we stay there until there's peace.
As all of this unfolds, the FBI says it's investigating who might be funding the protests. FBI Director Kash Patel told Just the News, quote, "The FBI is investigating any and all monetary connections responsible for these riots."
Videos circulating online show multiple stores in downtown LA being looted Monday night, with windows smashed at the Apple and Adidas stores and merchandise stolen. Attorney General Pam Bondi addressed the issue this morning.
Well, sure. Right now, it's keeping California safe. If Gavin Newsom isn't going to keep California safe, we are. You know, they imposed a curfew last night. I think that helped a bit. But today, we wanted them to declare. They didn't declare an economic disaster out there with all of the businesses. Had they done that, Kelly Loeffler and the Small Business Association could have come in and helped, given federal aid to all of these businesses in California. We've been seeing on the news all of these drugstores getting robbed, getting looted. The Apple store just got raided. I mean, we're all watching this live on the news. And this isn't just looting to me. You think people just run in, take something, leave, and nothing happens? We're using the Hobbs Act. We are charging robbery to protect Californians under this. If you loot a store, we are going to charge you with robbery under the Hobbs Act, and you're looking at maximum 20 years in prison. But we're going to prosecute you for that. Right now in California, what we're doing is working by bringing in the National Guard, by bringing in the Marines right now to back them up, to protect our federal buildings, to protect the highways, to protect the citizens. So right now in California, we're at a good point. We're not scared to go further. We're not frightened to do something else if we need to.
Meanwhile, Vivek Ramaswamy and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis criticized California as being unsafe and mismanaged. Governor Gavin Newsom said yesterday that state and local law enforcement were mostly successful in maintaining order despite a few incidents. He added that California is no stranger to episodes of civil unrest. Here's Newsom.
If you incite violence or destroy our communities, you're going to be held to account. That kind of criminal behavior will not be tolerated. Full stop. Already more than 220 people have been arrested, and we're reviewing tapes to build additional cases, and people will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Elon Musk steps back from his recent feud with President Trump. He said on X that he regrets some of his posts about Trump. Musk wrote on his social media platform X, quote, "I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week." He said they went too far. He did not say which specific posts he was talking about, though he has deleted several that were critical of Trump. One of those signaled support for impeaching the president. Musk's relationship with Trump deteriorated in public fashion last week as the two men traded jibes on social media. Musk slammed Trump's tax and domestic policy bill, labeling it a disgusting abomination. In a phone conversation with the New York Post, Trump commented on Musk's apology. He said, quote, "I thought it was very nice that he did that." President Trump will attend Les Miserables tonight, his first show at the Kennedy Center. The performance comes months after the president orchestrated a shakeup of the institution's leadership. Trump pushed out its former chairman, fired its longtime president, and pledged to overhaul the center. The Kennedy Center depends on revenue from tickets and subscriptions, as well as donations to operate. First Lady Melania Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance will also attend tonight's performance. Trump will sit in the presidential box overlooking center stage in the 2,300-seat theater. Donors who pay $100,000 to $2 million will get to attend a reception before the show and receive a photo with the president. If you're heading to Reagan National Airport this Saturday, you should prepare for possible delays. The Army is marking its 250th birthday with a parade and a flyover in Washington, D.C. The celebration happens to fall on President Trump's birthday. Both vehicle traffic and flights will be affected during the event. The Federal Aviation Administration said it will place temporary flight restrictions around the D.C. area. The parade kicks off at 6:30 p.m. and wraps up with fireworks at 9:45 p.m. The airport's website said that they're adjusting operations to allow for the military flyovers and the fireworks show. United Airlines told CNN they're offering a travel waiver for passengers flying through Reagan Airport. It's also adding 2 extra departures and 2 arrivals at Dulles International Airport as a backup. Delta Airlines is letting travelers change their flights without paying a fare difference. Southwest Airlines expects some delays on its 20 scheduled flights, but no cancellations. They also have a travel waiver in place for affected passengers. The U.S. Army is also celebrating its 250th anniversary with a special cake baked by cake boss Buddy Valastro. And NTD was one of the few news companies invited to the teaser event at the Carlos Bakery Factory, and that's before the grand showing at Times Square on June 14th. NTD's John Marshall was there.
I'm here in New Jersey at the Carlos Bake Shop Factory, where they make lots of secret cakes. We went on a tour earlier. We can't show you the secrets, but the cake boss himself was here with the Army. They were baking a cake for the 250th anniversary of the Army on June 14th. One thing that isn't a secret is that the cake boss was happy to sing for the Army representatives and his office crew. That was right after the Army went live on social media to tease the upcoming Army birthday bash in Times Square.
Every highway. Well, for me, it means the world. You know, to me, our military, I have so much respect for and tradition and honor for them. And they've sacrificed so much throughout the years, themselves, their families, and everything else. So for me to give back by what a cake is like, I don't want to say an easy thing for me to do, but it's a no-brainer. It's something that we always do. And, you know, we want people to feel like we care about them, especially our troops.
It's been over 10 years since the last time Buddy Valastro, a.k.a. the Cake Boss, made a special supersized tank cake to celebrate the Army's birthday in Times Square. But now it's the 250th anniversary of the Army, and the Cake Boss is called back into service once again.
Buddy's been supporting our events for a long time. So when we wanted to do something special for the 250th, when we reached out, Carlos Bake Shop, Buddy, they jumped right in on it, and they've never let us down. And I think this is the first time.
And we never will.
Yeah, this is the first time that we're really doing something special because it's 250th.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Master Sergeant Greg Williams, and we are here live out of the Cake Boss Factory.
The Army would only call on the best to build a cake for them. Buddy Valastro is most widely known for his reality show, Cake Boss, that aired on the TLC channel from 2009 to 2020. Or the many spin-off shows, or his worldwide brand of cakes and food eateries.
We're going to do a real traditional ceremony with lots of good music. I think the surprises are going to come from Buddy.
Yeah, we definitely got a cool cake coming out, and we're going to give cake to everybody. Going to actually have my brother-in-law there to cut the cake because he served in the first Gulf War. So, you know, we're a military family. We understand it true, and we see how much they sacrifice, and anything that we could do to kind of raise awareness and show a thank you, a little sign of gratitude to the men and women who serve for us. It's our pleasure.
One thing we were allowed to mention about their inter-factory workings was their plan to start selling quality frozen pizzas in the next couple months. One of the many items sold in their Carlos Bakery brick-and-mortar establishments. The last cake made for the Army's birthday bash could fit a person inside and shot a cannon of confetti at the audience. So this year's secret cake is sure to be another hit.
214 Times Square. We're here with the Cake Boss, signing out.
The Army will have different events around New York City on June 14th, which will include family fun experiences at Bryant Park. The public is invited to join the celebration of honoring the past and defending the future.
Did it my way.
Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Stay with us and we'll bring you more news right after this break.
Thank you.